Ghost padded restlessly across the courtyard of Castle Black, alabaster paws leaving soft prints in the half-melted snow. Dawn bled pale across the wall, but the light brought no warmth. Instead, it revealed what the night had stolen. Jon Snow's body lay in the ice-cold storage chamber beneath the rookery, wrapped in black wool and silence. No priestess's fire had kindled, no miracle had come, and the men of the Night's Watch moved about like mourners trapped inside a waking dream, unsure whether they grieved a Lord Commander, a brother, or the last fragile hope of the realm. Ser Davos Seaworth stood at the doorway, wind tugging the salt-flecked gray of his beard. He had kept vigil all night, half listening for Melisandre's boots upon the stair, half expecting the woman in red to descend with some burning promise of resurrection. Yet the corridor remained empty save for ravens croaking their discontent. The smell of niter and wet wood filled the air. Every so often Davos touched the hilt of the sword Jon had lent him. Longclaw seemed heavier now, as though it carried the weight of a man's unfinished destiny. Samwell Tarly had once read to Jon of heroes who rose again by the light of a god's fury. But Sam was leagues away, sailing south toward Old Town. The books he carried could offer no comfort to those now left behind. Dolorous Ed Old Marsh, the boy Ollie who could not bear to look at what his knife had carved. Above them all, Alistair Thorne strutted the ramparts, issuing curt orders, wiping the stain of guilt from his conscience with feigned righteousness. "We did our duty," he muttered to anyone who dared meet his gaze. "The bastard would have ruined us all." But Thorne could not command ghosts, and late at night the direwolf's howls pierced even the stoutest resolve, reminding every brother on the wall that the North had lost more than flesh. They had lost their guide through an endless winter. South of the wall, winter's shadow bled slowly into the neck. In distant White Harbor, Lord Wyman Manderley knelt before the ancient weirwood in the Wolf's Den and whispered a prayer for a boy who would never rule. Beside him, his son Wylus clenched parchment bearing tidings from the Night's Watch. The parchment was unbroken, the wax seal still shaped like a howling direwolf. Yet already the words felt old, as though the ravens themselves had carried decay. "Jon Snow is dead. The Watch will not march. The North stands alone." Lady Barbary Dustin received the same raven in Barrowton. She read it once, twice, then smiled, a cruel twist of satisfaction and regret. She had loved the Stark once, or perhaps had merely loved hating them. Either way, she saw the path before her. Without Eddard's bastard, the northern houses would fracture like ice beneath a sudden thaw. Roose Bolton's grip would tighten across the neck of every holdfast from the rills to the last river. In the Dreadfort's great hall, Ramsay Bolton paced before a new map stitched from flayed skin. "Dead men do not rally bannermen," he told his father, voice lilting with half-suppressed delight. Snow was a story they told themselves to sleep better at night. Some wolf-blood messiah come back from his cliff-edge bastards. But stories end. Ramsay's dagger traced imaginary cuts along the map, circling Carhold, Last Hearth, Bear Island. "We strike each in turn. Cut the claws from the beast before it learns its own strength." Roose regarded his son, pale eyes unreadable. "A wolf's pelt is finest when taken warm. Leave them frightened but breathing for now. Fear breeds obedience." Yet even the master of flaying could not ignore the unease trembling through the North. The Karstarks had not forgotten Robb Stark's death, nor did the Mormonts forget the burning of Deepwood. Rumors drifted like wayward snowflakes. The Umbers gathering spears at Last Hearth, the Manderleys provisioning ships under cover of darkness, the mountain clans whispering of vengeance in the high passes. Wolves hunted best in packs, and sometimes packs forgot they were beaten. At Winterfell, Sansa Stark woke each morning to the scent of wet hearthwood and the distant echo of dogs. The room Lady Valda had assigned her was cold, the mattress thin, but it was still home of a sort. Stones laid by her ancestors, halls to which her dreams returned even when her body had been stolen south. She moved like a silent shadow through the godswood, fingers brushing the red leaves as though they might become wings. Yet the weirwood's face offered no comfort. The North had always prayed to old gods who answered in silence. The news of Jon's death reached Sansa in a swift, brutal whisper. a black feather placed upon her plate by a kitchen girl whose mother had died in Ramses' kennels. Sansa read the words, and ice formed in her lungs. For a moment she remembered the boy who had given her needles made of snow, who had stood awkwardly beside her at Arya's lessons, who had smiled shyly at her on the King's Road before turning back to Castle Black. She had never truly known him, yet the thought of Jon gone forever left a hollow deeper than grief. With Robb, Bran, Rickon lost, and now Jon, there was no Stark son left to rally the banners. A girl alone against winter, she thought. Then she folded the feather into her sleeve and began to plan. The Vale of Arryn rested beneath a canopy of winter stars when Peter Baelish received word from his informants. "The bastard is dead," he mused, twirling a quill between slender fingers. How swiftly the board rearranges itself. In the next chamber, young Lord Robin cooed at his falcon, unaware the Game of Thrones had shifted again. Baelish penned letters on crisp parchment, promises of gold and marriage alliances, sealing each with the Mockingbird's imprint. He calculated distances, how long to reach Moat Cailin, how far to sail from Gulltown to White Harbor, and weighed them against the fears of men who thought themselves secure. The North belonged to whoever possessed the courage to claim it, and courage, like loyalty, could be bought. Far to the west, on the shores of Bear Island, little Lyanna Mormont held council in the hall of carved driftwood. She was small, almost lost inside a gray Tunkle's breastplate, but her voice rang hard as hammered iron. "The Boltons murdered the young wolf and betrayed the North," she declared, green eyes blazing. "Now they clap our heads in chains while ghosts of our kin wander restless. We will not kneel." Around her, seasoned warriors bowed their grizzled heads, shamed by the child's resolve. But resolve alone could not bridge the leagues between island and mainland. The waters of Ironman's Bay churned with pack ice, and the Boltons controlled the coast. Each raven they sent vanished into snow-laden skies. Lyanna's counselors argued for patience, yet patience tasted like ash. If the Mormont women could swim across that bay, we'd come clad in mail and blood, she thought. Instead, she dispatched her swiftest longship, the Bearclaw, crewed by 5 trusted kin, sail painted white to blend against the sea. They carried a message carved on driftwood: "Mormont lives. Stark lives in the hearts of the free. Gather at the Wolf's Blood Moot on the first full moon of thaw." Whether any northern lord would brave the Boltons to answer, none could say. North of the Gift, wildling clans huddled around makeshift barracks, uneasy guests of the Night's Watch. Without Jon's tempering hand, tempers flared. Giants bellowed at watchmen who denied them mead. Spearwives cursed Ser Thorn's patrols. Infants cried for mothers lost beyond the wall. Tormund Giantsbane shouldered the burden of peace, but even his rumbling laughs grew brittle. He had believed in the crow with the boy's face and wolf's heart. Now that crow lay cold beneath stone, and the promises between their peoples froze beside him. One night, under an aurora that painted the snow green and red, Tormund met Davos at the old lime kiln beyond the stables. "You gave him your word," Davos said quietly. "Help us hold the wall till the realm is ready." Tormund spat into the snow. "I gave Jon Snow my word. The rest of you crows still look at me as meat for your cookpots. We look at you as brothers." Davos's voice cracked. He had never been good at speeches. At least Jon did. "And I am trying." He extended a scarred hand. Tormund stared at it, then at the frozen heights of the wall. Finally, he clasped arms with the former smuggler. In that grip lived the memory of a fallen Lord Commander, and perhaps the seed of a fragile alliance yet clinging to life. Spring's promise slept beneath the snow, but in the north no man trusted promises. At Deepwood Motte, Asha Greyjoy roamed the wolf-haunted forests, her iron-born raiders dwindled by Stannis' defeat. She had lingered too long, her father dead, her brother missing, yet something bound her to these woods. Perhaps it was pride, or guilt, or the memory of a boy who had fought beside her against Ramses' hounds. When the raven came, "Snow is dead, Bolton ascendant," she felt no joy, only a prickling wariness. Power vacuums devoured the unwary as surely as krakens swallowed ships. She instructed her men to sharpen axes, repair longships, and watch the Treeline for Mormont signals. Stannis's followers might still roam, wounded and desperate. Manderley's might sail for vengeance. Umber's might march under the giant's broken chain. Even the Karstarks, who had bent knee to Bolton, might rethink old grievances. Alliances shifted faster than tides on Pike. Asha intended to ride whichever tide would carry her home, and scourge the bastard of Bolton from Winterfell if fate allowed. Yet fate, like winter, was impartial. In the Frostfangs, a harp of ice wind plucked lonely notes across jagged stone. A figure clothed in tattered skins knelt before a heart-shaped cairn where the free folk had buried the giant 1-1. She pressed a palm to the frozen mound. "The wolf boy is gone," she whispered in the old tongue. But the song is not ended. Val, the wildling princess, turned her gaze southward. She remembered Jon's gentleness toward Gilly, the way he freed man's raider, the choice to save her people. She would repay that debt. Gathering a cadre of spearwives and snow archers, she vowed to ride hard for Last Hearth, to stir the Umbers from grief-drunk slumber. If men of the Watch would not honor Jon's memory, she would kindle it in the north herself. At the wall, Thorne convened a council. "Winter is at our gates," he declared. "We cannot waste bread on savages or dream of southern wars. Send the wildlings back beyond the wall, seal the gate, and we may yet survive." Some brothers nodded, but others glanced toward the silent rookery where Jon's body still lay, awaiting final rites. Fear warred with shame. Euron's krakens, King Tommen's edicts, the distant whispers of dragons. None mattered if the dead walked again and the wall stood manned only by hearts hollowed of courage. On the third night after Jon's death, a storm hit the castle. Gallons of wet snow hammered palisades. The wind moaned like wounded wolves. Davos, ghost at his heels, crept to the storage chamber with a bundle of wood and kindling. Thuras of Myr had once spoken to him of fires that remembered names. If gods be merciful, Davos thought, let the flames recall Jon Snow. But he found no red priestess, only damp torches and exhaustion. He knelt beside the bier and whispered an old prayer sailors spoke for drowned men, a plea to the mother for mercy, to the father for judgment, to the stranger for peace. The candle's glow revealed the young man's pallid cheeks, the purple bruise blossoming beneath stitches. He looked less like a hero now, more like a boy who had strayed where he was never meant to go. Ghost pressed his muzzle against Jon's motionless hand. The direwolf's whine shivered the chamber. Then, as candles flickered, Ghost threw back his head and howled, a sound raw and primal, echoing through every corridor of Castle Black. Brothers jolted awake, swords half-drawn, hearts hammering. Thorne strode into the courtyard, eyes narrowing. At the far end, Davos emerged, cloak swirling in the gale. "We bury him at dawn," Thorne shouted, "and with him any talk of traitors." Davos met the older man's stare. "Bury him," the Onion Knight agreed, "but not his memory." He turned, gathering Ghost to his side. The storm raged on, but in the widow's tower Melisandre watched flames dance in her brazier. She had seen a king's face in fire once, and a bastard's face after that. Now the fire showed her only shifting shadows, dragons, snow, the flayed man's red-gold banners, yet no clear path forward. Shivering, the priestess realized the Lord of Light's flame felt cold as snow. Dawn broke blood-red. The watch assembled by the ice-filled fire pit, where cremations warmed stone long enough to stave off rot. Jon Snow's body rested on a bier of pine and driftwood. No family stood to weep, no northern lords, only black-cloaked figures and restless free folk beyond the gate. Alliser Thorne spoke a perfunctory eulogy about betrayal forgiven, duty fulfilled, while the sky wept sleet. Then he nodded to Satin to set the torch. But as Satin stepped forward, a cry erupted at the edge of the square. 1-1's brother Mag the Mighty charged through the gate, shoulders hunched beneath a cloak of snow-dusted hides. Wildlings surged behind him, led by Tormund and Val. Blades flashed. The watch raised spears. For a heartbeat, the morn teetered on slaughter. Davos planted himself between the lines, arms wide. "Stop!" His voice sliced the wind. Snow hissed under the giant's footfall as Mag halted, looming above the crowd. Ghost padded beside Davos, white fur bristling. "Give him to us," Tormund roared over the gale. "We will burn him with honor as a chieftain." "He was our Lord Commander," Thorn snarled. "His ashes remain here, where his oath was sworn." Val stepped forward, snowflakes dissolving on her lashes. "He was the bridge between your world and ours. If you burn him alone, his spirit will wander." The argument spiraled, heated as forge iron against Anvil. Men traded insults, fists, then blood. A spear grazed Mag's arm. He backhanded a ranger across the yard. Wildlings surged, crows countered, crude shields ringing dull. Amid chaos, Davos saw the torch fly from Satin's grasp, tumbling end over end until it slammed against fresh snow and sputtered out. The knight seized Ghost's scruff, dragging the direwolf toward the pyre. "Help me!" he bellowed. Two brothers he trusted, Ed and Gren, joined him, hoisting Jon's bier even as arrows split the air. They slipped into the rookery passage, slamming the iron-banded door. Behind them wood clattered, steel screamed, and somewhere outside Tormund's laugh echoed like thunder. "It can't hold," Ed panted, pressing a shoulder to the door. "Then we run," Davos replied, "for the north." They fled beneath the wall through an old smuggler's Sallyport Davos had discovered months earlier while scouting for easier access to the sea. The tunnel mouth opened upon the King's Road, 2 leagues south of Castle Black, hidden by a tumble of boulders. Outside, dawn painted the landscape bruised purple. They loaded Jon's corpse onto a mule cart procured from Molestown and set south, weary wheels crunching frost. Ghost trotted alongside, ever vigilant. Behind them, pale smoke rose, Watch brothers and wildlings still clashing. But Davos could not turn back. "I'll take him to Winterfell," he told the mule as though it were a priest. "Let the Boltons see they have killed more than a man. They have slain the hope of winter." It kept silent until the wall vanished behind a ridge. "And then we gather what banners we can. If we die stark. But we are crows. And crows feast on carrion left by wolves." It snorted. "That's poetic for you, sir." Davos did not smile. Poetry would not save them. News spread along the King's Road like wildfire in dry brush. A sullen innkeep at Queen's Crown saw the cart and recognized Longclaw's pommel. He sent a runner to the Umber men drinking in his taproom. They, in turn, spurred north on shaggy garrons. By dusk, the message had reached Last Hearth. Jon Snow's body stolen, bound for Winterfell. Lord Greatjon Umber had long since perished at the Twins. His heir Small Jon gone south in chains. Remaining at Last Hearth was a woman widowed, Lady Meage Umber, and her youngest sons barely of age. Still, Umber hearts burned fierce. They had followed Robb once. They might yet follow a memory of his bastard brother. Meage convened her thanes, axes banging upon shields. "If the dead cannot lead," she declared, "then we carry his body like a banner. Bolton will taste the wrath of ghosts." That night fires lit across the Wolfswood. Crow's caws mingled with war horns. And in the darkness of his cart, Jon Snow dreamed nothing at all. In White Harbor, Wyman Manderly hosted a feast of oysters and salt pork. His jests drew nervous laughter from lesser lords, but beneath the merriment knifed a single fact. The North's would-be savior lay dead. Wyman's youngest grandson danced upon a tabletop, wooden sword whirling, proclaiming himself Lord Snow. The crowd roared. Wyman allowed the charade, yet his eyes glinted. When the musicians paused, he raised a goblet. "A toast," he announced, "to the fallen wolves who guard us still. May their howls keep traitors sleepless." After the toast, he slipped to his study. There he unfurled a hidden flag. Stark direwolf quartered with Manderly mermen, stitched in secret. "Soon," he murmured, fingers tracing the charcoal eyes of the wolf. "Soon, my prince." His ravens would soon fly, bidding Karstark and Glover, Tallheart and Reed, to gather at the Wolf's Blood moot. Alive, Jon had been a rallying flame. Dead, he might become a bonfire. Winterfell's battlements glistened with hoarfrost as Ramsay practiced archery beneath the weeping sky. His arrows thudded into a straw target shaped like a direwolf. He imagined Sansa's face upon it, imagined the umber of her hair matted with gore, and smiled. "Father," he called, not turning. "How fares our northern realm?" Roos's footsteps were soundless, restless but cowed. "Yet we must tighten our grip. Dispatch ravens. All bannermen to muster in Winterfell on the first night of the new moon. Any who delay shall forfeit hostages." "Let them come," Ramsay said, loosing another arrow. "Let them bow." Yet unease twitched in the bastard's gut. He had enjoyed hunting men when they ran singly through the woods. Hunting a pack could prove exhilarating or fatal. At dusk, Davos and his grim procession reached the ancient bridge at the Fever. Snow fell in thick curtains, muffling hoofbeats. On the far bank, a cloaked rider waited, banner catching moonlight. A black-winged crow set against a white field. As Davos drew near, the rider pushed back her hood. Lyanna Mormont's face was fierce with windburn, eyes bright. "Ser Davos," she said, "you carry my lord's kin." "He is gone," Davos answered softly. "Yet he fights on in us." She signaled. From the trees emerged a host. Islanders in bearskins, archers with woven spruce bows, shield maidens bearing painted oak. Davos's breath caught. "Mormont answers the call," Lyanna declared. "Where is this moot?" "Where all wolves make their stand," Davos said, as if the words fell ready-forged from steel. "The weirwood grove at the crowning of the crescent moon." Lyanna nodded. "Then ride swift. We shall shadow." Ghost sensed Winterfell hours before the cart crested the ridge. The stench of dogs and fear, of broken vows and burning pine. He bared teeth. Davos laid a hand upon the direwolf's back. The castle lights flickered like embers beneath gloom. "Not yet, Avuz murmured. "A storm needs thunder before lightning." They camped in the ghost forest west of the castle, sheltered under deadfall. Around them, Umbers and Mormonts gathered, joined by ragged Karstark deserters, mountain clans in patched leather, fishermen from White Harbor. Fires spotted the night like red stars fallen to earth. Women sharpened spears. Men whispered songs of the last hero. When dawn's first horn sounded, Davos addressed them atop a stump. He spoke of Jon's dream, a north unbroken, a kingdom bound by honor. He spoke of the Boltons' treachery, of the houses flayed for speaking stark. He spoke of White Walkers glimpsed in whirling snow. "These are not children's tales," he finished, voice raw. "Winter marches. If we quarrel amongst ourselves, we shall perish alone. So let the dead man guide us. We carry him into battle, for his silence speaks louder than Bolton lies." A hush followed, heavy as unfallen snow. Then Lyanna Mormont lifted her sword. "Mormont," she cried. "He knows no king but the king in the north whose name is Stark." One by one, voices joined. Umbers, Tall Hearts, woodsmen, spearwives, even Asha's ironborn shouting horse assent. Ghost threw back his head and howled, an anthem older than castles. And under the gray dawn, men knelt before a corpse that could no longer see them. Inside Winterfell's great hall, Roose watched the northern banners array outside the walls and understood the shape of things. Ramsay raved about sorties and flaying and torches, but his father thought of different fires, the ones lit beneath a man's reputation, consuming slowly until loyalty crumbled like dry leaves. Roose called for Maester Tybalt. "Send a raven to King's Landing. Inform the Queen Regent that traitors rise against her Warden of the North and beg her grace for reinforcements." Tybalt inclined his head, but Roose doubted help would come soon. Lannister gold flowed thin as melted snow since Tywin's death, and the Iron Throne had other enemies closer at hand. Ramsay pressed for an immediate charge. "We ride at night, crush them before they encircle." He licked lips. "We'll hang the bastard's corpse from the battlements." Roose weighed his son's hunger against the cold arithmetic of war. He saw the sharpened spears of Mormont women, the iron axes of Umbers, the longbows of reedsmen. Snow and mud would bog cavalry. The wolves had chosen ground carefully. "We hold the walls," he said. "Winterfell has withstood greater foes than these Sel's words." "Sel's words," Ramsay scoffed. "They raise stark banners." "They raise a dead man," Roose corrected, eyes like thin ice. "And dead men are stubborn foes." Sansa watched from a high window, fingers digging crescents into her palms. She recognized Manderley Green, Karstark White Sunburst, Umber Roaring Giant, and over them all the flapping gray direwolf. "My family calls," her heart whispered, but the castle door remained locked. Ramsay kept her under guard day and night. That evening, he brought her to supper clad in Bolton crimson. He stroked her cheek with bloody fingers and paraded her before his lords as if she were a trophy. During the feast, Roose announced that a band of traitors menaced loyal Winterfell. Ramsay boasted that he would flay the ringleaders and gift their skins to Sansa for a cloak. She forced herself to smile, yet her eyes sought the fires beyond the walls where her brother, no cousin, she corrected automatically, lay dead. She wondered if ghosts felt cold. After midnight, she slipped from her chamber with a stolen map, traced passageways learned in childhood. In the crypts, she knelt before her father's statue. "Jon is dead," she whispered. A tear slid down marble and into darkness. "I must be what remains." She rose and turned toward Lyanna Stark's stone effigy. Pale candlelight caught the girl's eyes, forever carved to gaze upon nothing. Lyanna defied a king, Sansa thought, and the realm bled for her. But maybe, just maybe, that blood can cleanse. She hid the map in her cloak and crept back to her chamber, a plan crystallizing like frost patterns on glass. Daybreak gleamed copper upon snow, revealing two armies facing each other across a white field rippled with drifts. The Bolton host stood bristling with pikes and tower shields, flayed man banners snapping in frigid gusts. Ramsay rode a black stallion at their center, eyes bright and feverish. At his side were Frey men under Ser Hosteen, Karstark loyalists under Lord Alice's usurper Uncle Harrion, and a scattering of hill tribes coerced by threat of flaying. Opposite, the Northern Coalition arrayed in ragged yet resolute lines. Karstarks who had abandoned Bolton livery now stood shoulder to shoulder with Mormont bear cloaks. Umbers clad in chain and badger fur, white-cloaked fishers of the White Knife, tall clansmen wielding bronze-banded shields. Davos and Lyanna rode before them, Jon's beer lashed atop a cart draped with direwolf banners. Ghost prowled beside the wheels, low growls vibrating through his chest like distant thunder. No horns sounded, no champions rode forth. The wind was the only herald. Snow swirled, shrouding the world in a white hush. Then Ramsay loosed the first arrow. Black-shafted, barbed, and war erupted. Bolton crossbows sang, bolts rattling against upraised shields. Umbers formed a shield wall, axes braced. Spears thrust, arrows hissed back. The field churned into a mire of hoofprints and blood. Ramsay's cavalry attempted a flank, but hidden trenches carved overnight swallowed mounts screaming. Manderley pikemen countercharged, blue-green helms glinting through blood mist. In the tumult, Davos steered the cart toward the Bolton lines. Arrows clanged off makeshift iron plating. He could barely see for snow and smoke. Beside him, Lyanna roared commands, her tiny figure a banner of fire. Wildlings under Tormund punched through the Frey flank, hammers smashing shields. Asha's iron-born long axes carved paths through Karstark traitors. The giant mag lifted a horse and hurled it screaming into a wedge of Bolton spearmen. Ramsay saw the cart approaching and wheeled his stallion. He spurred through the chaos, a curved dagger in hand. "Snow!" he shouted, manic glee sparkling. "I'll cut your head off twice." He barreled toward Davos, only to find Ghost leaping, jaws closing on the horse's throat. The stallion shrieked, toppled, crushed its rider. Ramsay rolled free, slicing at the direwolf's flank. Ghost yelped, white fur blooming red, yet did not relent. Teeth snapped inches from Ramsay's face. Then an Umber spear pinned the bastard's arm to the ground. Mage Umber loomed, breathing steam. She raised a notched great axe. For the king in the north, she growled and swung. The bastard Bolton's scream shivered birds from trees a league away. Atop Winterfell's battlements, Roose watched the battle tilt. His men faltered while the Stark coalition pressed like an avalanche. He weighed retreat, perhaps south to the neck, but saw too many spears aligned against flight. The wolves had come. He descended the steps, intent on slaying Sansa before escape. In the corridor outside her chamber, he met Lady Valda, round with child. She looked at his red-streaked cloak, eyes wide. "The battle? Lost," he said simply. "Come?" He reached for her arm, but an arrow sprouted from his throat. Roose's eyes went wide. He clawed at the shaft, gurgling. The archer lowered her bow. Sansa Stark, hand steady, face pale as new snow. Roose collapsed, choking on his own blood. Sansa retrieved the keys from his belt. "South," she told Valda. "Through the battlement's passage. Hurry." Valda fled, tears freezing on cheeks. Sansa turned and strode toward the great hall, the bow still warm in her grip. Outside, Ramsay's standard fell. Freedmen cheered, drowning screams beneath triumphant roars. Davos knelt beside Jon's bier as the cart jolted to a halt just short of Winterfell's main gate. He reached into the coffin, fingers closing around Longclaw's hilt. "Forgive me," he whispered, sliding the blade free. The sigil of House Stark gleamed, a silent rebuke. With Lyanna at his side, he raised the sword high. "The North remembers," she cried, and the cry rolled across the ranks, echoed by thousands of throats until it shook the very stones. Bolton defenders upon the ramparts quailed. Some dropped bows, others retreated. In that moment, the main gate creaked open from within. Sansa stood framed by torchlight, cloak billowing, arrow-nocked bow in hand. "Winterfell belongs to the Starks," she proclaimed. "Enter and claim your home." Cheers crashed like surf against cliffs. The Umber shield wall surged. Wildlings howled. Manderleys sang the verse of knotted nets. Inside, Bolton men threw down arms. Freys attempted flight only to be cut down by spearwives. The battle did not end quickly, but end it did. They carried Jon Snow through the broken courtyard, where the pool of the weirwood reflected a sky now clear, stars glimmering. They laid him before the heart tree. Sansa knelt, tears streaking grime. "I will see the North safe," she vowed. "I swear it by ice and blood." Lyanna Mormont touched Sansa's shoulder. Davos placed Longclaw upon Jon's chest, the bear's head pommel glinting silver under moon. Tormund's booming voice broke the hush. "Let him burn under the sky," he urged. Yet the Northmen hesitated. They wished to keep their lord within stone crypts. Arguments flowered again, traditions versus promises, until Sansa spoke softly. "He gave his life for all of us. Let the gods, old and new, share his pyre." Thus they built a bier within the godswood, pine and dry oak stacked high, wildling oil poured. Tormund spoke of the wolf that bridged tribes, Davos of the boy who aimed always at honor, Sansa of the brother-cousin who shielded her in childhood. Then Ghost stepped forward, muzzle to the flame, and in the spark of a single breath, the pyre ignited. Fire rose into the night, sparks spiraling into the dark like swift red stars seeking some celestial throne. Northmen knelt, wildlings bowed. Sansa felt heat lick her cheeks, saw the weirwood's red leaves curl. The scent of smoke mingled with pine sap, ash with snow, and in that moment, as flame devoured flesh, the North found in death a new kind of king. A king carved not in flesh or crown, but in memory and purpose, forged of sorrow and unbroken will. When dawn came, blackened embers smoldered beneath the heart tree, and the snow around the bier had melted into a pool clear as glass. Ghost sat vigil, eyes reflecting first light. In the keep's solar, northern lords convened. Davos stood near Sansa, Lyanna at her other side. They debated titles. Queen in the north, some said. Lady of Winterfell, others. But Sansa raised a hand. "No crown sits easy amidst war," she said. "Let the north be guided by counsel until the dead are vanquished, until spring returns." A murmur of surprise rippled, then grudging respect. "Counsel I," Wyman Manderley agreed. "But the chair must bear a name. I nominate Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, Guardian of the North." Voices rose in assent. Lyanna grinned. "Mormont serves." Thus the Wolf's Council was formed: Mormont, Umber, Manderley, Reed, Glover, Flint, Davos as envoy to the Watch, Asha as master of ships, Tormund representing free folk. They swore to hold Winterfell, to feed people, to fortify Moat Cailin, to mine dragonglass along the Broken Branch if legends told true. Sansa spoke last. "Let the North stand as one pack. Loose we are prey. Together we are the storm." Outside the window, snow drifted soft upon a world scarred by battle. Ghost lifted his muzzle, breathing the scent of dawn. Somewhere far beyond, others stirred in silent forests, but for a heartbeat the North held its breath in defiant peace. The story of Jon Snow had ended, but his absence, like the hush before a tempest, filled every heart with a fierce resolve. For sometimes the dead do more than haunt the living. Sometimes they lead them. The embers of Jon Snow's pyre cooled to gray as the North set about stitching itself back together, thread by thread, vein by frozen vein. In Winterfell's courtyards, boot prints crisscrossed slush that smelled of iron and pine resin. The air hummed with the rasp of whetstones and the creak of new-cut beams hauled into place where Ramsay's torches had scorched the ramparts. Sansa walked those yards at dawn each day, cloak brushed by flakes so light they swirled like midges. She listened, not for speeches, for she had learned speeches could lie, but for the cadences of toil, the grunt of a smith folding steel, the hiss of a cook ladling broth, the clipped orders of Lyanna Mormont drilling lads twice her age with ash-hafted spears. When those sounds faltered, she made note, for faltering meant hunger or doubt, and either could crack stone once spring melt swelled the rivers and the dead things in the snow began to move again. Inside the great hall, Davos unfurled the latest tally on a scarred oak table sticky with old ale. 800 spear-ready Manderleys, 400 Umbers, some yet missing fingers from frostbite, 300 wildlings counted among Tormund's ranks, a trickle of Karstark deserters seasoned by grief, a handful of Glover archers, Asha's dwindling iron-born clutching axes dulled by green mainland wood. More came each sunrise. One day a string of flint hunters staggering beneath hare carcasses, the next a gaggle of reed-slim crannogmen with poison darts and stories of wights prowling moors deep in the neck. Supplies stretched thin. Davos's pen scratched margin notes, shore up grain reserves in the rills, barter iron tools to Bear Island for dried cod, solicit White Harbor's millers for flour once the bay thaws. His good hand ached, the missing joints throbbing in the cold, but he pushed on. Every figure in those columns was a promise to men who had followed a dead king's memory. Council sessions spilled long into evening. They met in the solar, fire snapping, windows weeping condensation that blurred the courtyard lamps into smears of amber. Wyman Manderley's deep voice, rich as marrow, laid out shipping routes through sea ice. Meege Umber thundered that the Freys still skulking within the twins should be hanged for red wedding treachery. Hother Reed, a slim man with mud-spattered boots, spoke seldom, but when he did all leaned close, for he spoke of silent shadows glimpsed between barrows, white shapes that swallowed torches and left iron blades rimed with hoarfrost. Asha drummed fingers on her belt and spat salt-cured curses at the notion of fighting snow phantoms. "Blades sing loud enough," she muttered. "If your dead men march south, we'll hack them same as Bolton thralls." But her eyes flicked to the hearth where Jon's wolf pelt cloak now hung above the mantel, and doubt pooled in the hollows of her cheeks. Sansa presided, not from the high-backed lord's chair. She had ordered it removed, but from a plain oaken stool scattered with raven feathers left by Ghost's restless pacing. Titles mattered less than example, she told them. Their enemies were not fooled by embroidery. When tempers flared, she reminded each lord of the oaths their grandsires had sworn under the dire wolf banner. She spoke softly yet with an iron cadence that stilled arguments. Many nights, once the council dispersed, she remained alone beside guttering candles, fingers tracing the grain of the table until wax dripped cold onto her knuckles. She would touch the cool beads and think of the pyre, of Jon's blackened armor and the way sparks had lifted toward the sky in silent farewell. Memory hurt, but it steadied her. She had bled enough tears to know pain could be used like mortar. Far beyond Winterfell's rebuilt gates, the realm stirred. In the Vale of Arryn, Littlefinger wrote letters sealed with a mockingbird, each missive stitched with measured flattery and veiled threats. One he addressed to Sansa: "I rejoice at your survival, my sweetling. Winterfell basks anew beneath your grace." He offered thrice the Vale's strength to guard her seat, troops that, in truth, he could only muster with Robin's capricious approval. Another letter fluttered southward to King's Landing. Chaos blooms. The northern girl hides behind a ragtag war council worshipping a burned corpse. Along with it, he enclosed a pouch of pale ashes claimed to be Jon Snow's, though in truth the ashes had been scraped from a baker's hearth. Every letter was a step along a ladder only he could see, rising into clouds of ambition. In King's Landing, Queen Regent Cersei Lannister received Littlefinger's ash-smudged parchment with a sniff. The city still clacked with the wooden skeletons of half-finished siege engines, testament to her mad plan to defend against dragons she did not truly believe in. She thought of the north the way a cat thinks of distant thunder. Troubling, but far enough to ignore so long as claws remained sharp nearer home. Yet rumors prickled. Wildlings at the wall under a red woman's thrall. A stark maiden weaving alliances like spider silk. Bolton flayed banners toppled. Cersei dispatched a raven to her uncle Kevin, commanding investigation. She poured the snow ashes onto a silver dish, imagining the bastard's ghost choking on Lannister wine and screaming for lost vengeance. Then she swept the ashes into a brazier and watched them curl, satisfied at destroying even a rumor twice removed. In Old Town, Samwell Tarly squinted through the gloom of the library, quills tucked behind both ears like twin feathers. He pored over vellum detailing dragonglass seams beneath the cliffs of Dragonstone and scrawled margins full of frantic arithmetic. Quantities, mining depths, sail days to deliver to White Harbor. Gilly dozed with baby Sam amid cushions, while the maesters muttered that winter nights bred too many fanciful minds. Sam wrote until knuckles cracked, then sealed a thick bundle of notes with black wax impressed by a crude wolf's head he had carved with a penknife. He prayed the raven would find Winterfell swiftly. Winter skies swallowed many messages, and each lost parchment was a sword absent from their cause. At Castle Black, Ser Alliser Thorne limped through corridors that stank of blood and boiled tallow. The brawls with wildlings had ceased only after Thorne's shoulder was dislocated beneath Mag's sweeping club. Dozens lay dead, dozens more fled north under cover of storm, leaving the watch gutted. Supplies dwindled faster now that Ser Thorne's pride forbade barter with kindling fires in the south. He preached stoic austerity, yet each night frost crept deeper through arrow slits, icing lash welts on men's backs. Melisandre vanished on a crimson-saddled horse the morning after Jon's pyre. Some said she rode for Shadow Tower, others that she followed whispers only fire could utter. Thorne never asked, he no longer trusted flames. He trusted stone, ice, and silence. On Bear Island, gray-green breakers slammed basalt cliffs beneath a sky the color of hammered pewter. Longships bobbed in half-flooded coves, their tarred hulls patched with oak still bleeding sap. A council of shield maidens gathered in an earthen hall smelling of salt and pine pitch. Lady Lyanna's mother had breathed her last wind 2 moons past, but the child lord faced the circle without trembling. She spoke of wolf banners flying once more above Winterfell, of a stark girl rising where grown men had fallen, of dead walkers glimpsed north of the Frostfangs. "We do not wait behind tides," she concluded, voice sharp. "We sail." The hammer of her words drove iron nails into every heart present. Before dawn, 12 longboats cut dark wakes toward the mainland, oars beating cadence with the thrum of bearskin war drums. Midwinter settled like lead. The shivering sea froze tea. Leagues from White Harbor's quay, forcing merchants to unload cargo onto sledges hauled by ox teams across groaning sheets of ice. At night, lights glowed beneath the frozen skin, blues and greens swirling like drowned torches. Sailors swore they saw silhouettes drifting below, swords in hand, pale crowns of frost atop skulls that gleamed. Lord Manderley doubled the harbor watch and ordered every child kept indoors after dusk. In his private solar, he met with Davos, who had ridden the arduous trail beset by snow leopards and worse. They bent over maps pinned by river stones. "I can pledge 3 cogs once ice breaks," Wyman murmured, beard trembling like moss. "But my walls grow thin with grain." Davos passed him Samwell's parchment. Eyes widened at the mention of dragonglass. "If we arm the merman's spear with this black glass," Wyman mused, "the others will find our waters less hospitable." He sealed his oath with blue ink. White harbor sails for Dragonstone come first thaw. In Winterfell's crypts, Sansa descended by lamplight one frost-sharpened night. She carried 2 gifts: a silver vial of Tears of Lys discovered in Ramsay's stores, and a dagger forged anew from Valyrian steel shards scavenged from an ancient mace once wielded by House Bolton. When she reached the statue of Eddard Stark, she knelt, pressing the vial to cold stone. "I thought poison my ally once," she whispered, remembering King's Landing and a necklace turned weapon. "No longer." She spilled the tears onto the earth at the statue's feet, a surrender of old habits to deeper faith. Then she unsheathed the dagger. Dark ripples flowed beneath candlelight like oil upon water. "What was flayed is reforged," she vowed. She laid the blade upon the niche reserved for Jon, though his bones were ash. She would not wield it until the hour demanded blood for the living rather than retribution for the dead. Beyond the gift, Tormund's scouts marked spectral fires dancing across the haunted forest. Flame blazed with no fuel, blue-white tongues that left frozen trunks in their wake. When Ravenska Skag rolled back into camp, his red beard rhymed with frost. He spoke of a shadowed figure taller than giants driving whites before it like hounds. "Ice crowns its brow," he said. "Eyes like noon sky, heart colder than moonlight." Tormund relayed the warning southward via Raven. At Winterfell, the message arrived on a morning of brittle sun. Council convened, faces wan. Plans hardened. Clans would fortify the White Knife Crossing. Manderly fleets would ferry Dragonglass. Ironborn would scour shores for white carcasses. Reed Crannogmen would seed barrow swamps with fires of pitch to hinder icy advance. It was strategy blended of desperation and stubborn hope. 2 nights later, a blizzard swallowed the castle so wholly that torchlight reached only an arm's length. Snow blew sideways in solid sheets. Banners froze mid-flap. Horses screamed and tore at their stalls. Sansa stood atop the broken tower where her childhood chambers had overlooked the Godswood. Ghost sat beside her, red eyes narrowed against whipping ice. Together they watched the storm swirl like a thing alive, striking the battlements with claws of crystal. In the gale's roar, she fancied she heard her brothers' voices. Robb calling charge, Bran murmuring the names of ravens, Rickon laughing shrill, Jon speaking softly of duty. The sound knifed her heart, yet she stood until snow crusted her eyelashes, because she had learned there was a strength in facing hurt until it dulled. Spring's first omen arrived as a crow feather dropped upon the training yard one dawn. A single meltwater rivulet trickling from the ice sheath that had cloaked Winterfell's outer wall. The droplet gleamed beneath a wan sun before it hardened again, but every onlooker felt the shift. Work quickened. Tanners cured hides by hearth smoke. Smiths quenched arrowheads. Ironborn set scaffolds to repair the collapsed southeast turret, cursing each other in salt tongue. Children chased goats through slush while mothers measured out the last stores of oats. Hope was minor, easily strangled, yet it sprouted like hardy tundra grass if given half a breath. On the eve of the new moon, a horn bleated from the west road. Columns of Vale men-at-arms marched beneath falcon banners, gilded helms glinting like mirrored snow. At their head rode Lord Jon Royce, armor green with verdigris, his broad face stern. Beside him pranced Lord Robin Arryn, pale and trembling yet dressed in 2 large mail that clattered with each fearful shiver. Peter Baelish flanked them, smile hidden by a sable collar. They crossed Winterfell's bridge and found Sansa waiting in the courtyard, red hair unbound, leather surcoat embroidered only by a single direwolf head above her breast. Sansa bowed to Robin first. "My lord cousin, your presence honors Winterfell." Robin managed a shy nod. She turned then to Jon. "The Knights of the Vale are welcome steel." Jon dismounted, offered a formal clasp. Finally, her eyes met Baelish's. He swept into a flourish, but she raised a hand to forestall his pretty words. "You found me once in darkness," she said. "Today I stand in dawn. Let there be light between us, not shadow." The words hung, ambiguous as the grin he returned. He sensed the shift in her bearing, a steel he had not forged. Yet he bowed, murmuring assent. The Vale Knights swelled Winterfell's muster to near 5,000 souls, though half lacked winter gear. Sansa ordered wool cloaks sewn through the night. Bare island looms rattled. Umbers felled extra spruce to edge the cloaks in leather. Peter prowled corridors, whispering to lesser lords, fostering alliances that he thought unseen. But Davos set the free folk to follow him in plain sight. When Littlefinger approached Tormund with a purse of silver, the wildling laughed until tears froze in his beard, then told the Southron lord exactly which parts of him would be roasted should he attempt to bribe a son of the snow. The purse ended tossed into the latrine, and word spread. Men chuckled, Baelish seethed. Under Sansa's watch, the council expanded, Royce given command of Winterfell's outer cavalry, while Baelish pressed to oversee provisions. She denied him politely, handing that duty to Lady Maya Stone, newly arrived with an escort of bastards' daughters from the Fingers. Peter's smile grew thinner by the hour. During drills on the King's Road Plateau, Ghost perked ears at a distant sound, hoofbeats muffled by melting crust. A rider galloped through slop, a Karstark outrider, breath pluming. "Host approaching from the Twins," he gasped. "Frey men and Lannister outriders, 2,000 lances, heavy horse, baggage carts." Sansa convened war council. Options lay stark. Meet the host on open ground, where Vale Knights might match their charge, or lure them into Winterfell's freshly patched walls, risking siege supplies. Davos favored the plateau, Royce agreed. Meej Umber spat that open ground was a grave for infantry. Finally Sansa decided they would split. Royce's knights and Asha's reavers would form a hammer and anvil on the road, while Tormund and wildlings harried the rear through birch copses. Manderly archers would hold shallow ridges, forcing horse into bottlenecks. If the plan failed, fallback lines would retreat to Winterfell, but every man knew a siege would starve them before spring's full thaw. They marched at dawn. Snowmelt ran beneath boot soles. Sansa rode a shaggy gray gelding, not for show but necessity, for she insisted on witnessing every line of defense. Ghost shadowed her stirrup, eyes sweeping. Peter offered a silk-lined cloak of Arryn blue, the gallant image of queenly virtue. He cooed, but she declined, wearing instead a plain boiled leather jerkin over dark wool. Peter's eyes flickered, but he masked dismay behind courtly flourish. On the plateau they arrayed as planned. Vale Knights lined shields rim to rim. Umberfoot bristled spears angled upward. Bear Islanders crouched behind tower shields painted with snarling white bears. Ironborn lurked unseen along a shallow creek bed, axes coated in frost. Free folk archers clung to fir trunks at the ridge crest. Blades steamed. Breath formed ghostly banners. Sky overhead bruised purple. The Frey Lannister host emerged in ordered ranks, pennons snapping with red trout and golden lion. At its vanguard rode Ser Hosteen Frey astride a destrier barbed in plates of lacquered bone. Beside him a Lannister captain in gilded half-plate. They slowed upon sight of the defenders, weighed numbers. Trumpets blared challenge. No champion rode forth. Instead Hosteen lifted a standard high. Atop it dangled a limp hide, the flayed skin of some peasant child. Gasps rippled through northern lines. Rage followed. Sansa felt bile rise but kept voice steady as she addressed her captains. "They think terror will break us. Show them what fear becomes when faced with wolves." The Frey cavalry charged first. Hooves drumming thunder across packed snow, lances lowered. Vale shields locked. At command they knelt, presenting angled rims. Lannister squadrons split right to flank but met a wedge of birch logs rolled downhill by wildlings, horses stumbling. Spears thrust upward, seeking chinks under comparison. Lances shattered on timber. Men screamed as mounts toppled, limbs crushed beneath plate. Northern archers loosed, shafts singing, burying feathers deep in gold and bone. Blood misted, Amid chaos, Asha's Ironborn rose from the creek bed behind the cavalry rear, axes whirling in two-handed arcs. They hacked at hamstrings of horses, dragged riders into icy water. Lannister rear guard wheeled to counter, exposing flank to Manderly longbows whose barbs had been dipped in vials of sand lizard venom purchased at salt pans years prior. The poison worked slow, but pain sapped strength quickly on freezing fields. Frye infantry advanced under crossbow cover, rows of kilted pikemen in mismatched surcoats. They slogged through churned slush toward Umber shield wall. Meege bellowed the charge at last, and her giants of the north surged, axes reaping. The clash rang like smiths hammering 1,000 anvils. Overhead, the cry of a great eagle echoed. Some said it was a wildling skin-changer urging courage, others that it was the gods themselves. Sansa watched from a low knoll, flanked by Davos and 3 Mormont guards. When enemy reserves tried to swing wide through a hollow, she dispatched a detachment of Crannoc spear skirmishers led by Hother Reed. They emerged knee-deep in boggy melt, throwing tar-tip darts that ignited upon impact. Blazing men stumbled, smoke blending with mist. The smell of burning fat curdled the air. Amid the melee, Ser Hosteen Frye reached the Vale lines and cut 2 knights down, bellowing insults about wolf girl who hides behind skirts. Royce spurred forward, mace raised. The old knight's blow hammered Hosteen's helm, denting steel into bone. Still Hosteen swung, desperate, until a shadow launched over Royce's horse. Ghost barreled into the fray, fangs worrying mail until throat gave, blood geysering onto snow. A hush shuddered through enemy ranks. Some stumbled back, eyes on the white wolf now streaked crimson. The Lannister captain rallied a final cavalry thrust, horns blaring. But as riders formed wedge tormans, hidden berserkers burst from spruce thickets on their flank, war clubs swatting men from saddles. One wildling woman clambered a rearing stallion, slit the captain's throat with a bronze sickle, and hurled the lion banner into the mud. The Frye Lannister host broke then, cohesion lost. Some fled south along the King's Road. Others tried to yield only to find Ironborn mercy measured in inches of blade. Sansa raised her voice. "Prisoners of rank only," she called, and whistles relayed the order. Wildlings grumbled but obeyed. The greater war lay north, and each sword spared might rise again against the dead. By dusk the plateau belonged to wolves. Fires burned to cauterize wounds. Snow melted pink around hundreds of bodies stacked for burial or ransom. Medical tents buzzed with maesters and woodswives sewing flesh. Sansa walked the field, coat splattered. She knelt by dying men, offered water, closed bleeding eyes. She found the flayed hide that had flown on Frey's banner. A boy no older than Bran had been. She removed her cloak and wrapped the small ruin of a body, carrying it herself to the pyre. Onlookers bowed heads, even Ironborn falling silent. The flames lifted hot tears onto chilled cheeks. Sansa murmured a prayer learned beside her mother long ago, words that tasted of river reeds and southern spring days. She vowed the boy's name would be recorded alongside countless unknown. The North would remember every child lost to fear. That night the council gathered in a tent woven with cavernous shadows. Spirits high, they spoke of sending envoys to the twins to demand hostages, of carving road markers bearing direwolf sigils where Frye banners once fluttered. But Sansa tempered their fervor. "Victory tempts pride," she warned. "The true enemy does not feast, does not bleed, does not bargain. We have gained time, nothing more." She tasked Yohn Royce with repairing broken lances, Manderly with forging spearheads from melted Lannister helms, Asha with probing sea lanes for Ironborn clusters still loyal to Euron's madness. She named Davos envoy to the wall, bearing a portion of dragonglass arrowheads and a plea for truce. And quietly, she instructed Lyanna to gather trusted riders and scour the bar Rolands for signs of moving dead. Reports had grown more frequent, and though most lords deemed them windtales, Sansa recalled a boy whose corpse had stared up at her on the wall with blue eyes that knew no fear. In the quiet hours past midnight, Peter Baelish slipped through camp to Sansa's tent, silk shoes silent on frozen earth. He found her knelt over maps lit by a single tallow candle, pale hair unbraided. He praised her victory, spoke of destiny, of how together they could shepherd the north to golden dawn. She listened, eyes shuddered. When he leaned close, whispering of marriage alliance, her hand moved, faster than he'd anticipated, and rested upon the Valyrian dagger hilt beside the inkpot. Its rippled steel drank candlefire. "My father once trusted a dagger," she said calmly. "He lost his head for it." Peter's breath hitched. Sansa smiled, polite, distant. "Rest well, Lord Baelish. Tomorrow we ride east to secure the Queen's Crown Ford. Your knowledge of river crossings will be invaluable." He retreated, cloak sweeping, thoughts racing. He had seen the steel in Catelyn's daughter, and knew a misstep might shear his own thread from her tapestry. Dawn broke sullen, clouds bruised with ash from funeral pyres. Scouts returned with fresh dread. Whites sighted near the last river, ranks shambling yet driven by eerie purpose. Reed skirmishers swore they heard snarls of undead direwolves. Umbers claimed to have slain a bear whose guts spilled snow and worms, yet still it clawed until its skull cracked. Those tales reached Winterfell with midday ravens. Sansa ordered alarm horns ready at every watchtower. She forged pacts between clans ordinarily fractious, Grimm and Norei, Wool and Burley, by binding wards to Manderley grain deliveries or Mormont timber shipments. The ledger of favors grown long. Debts would matter little if the realm froze, but she tracked them still, for the north would need rebuilding should dawn follow the night. On a sleeting afternoon, a second raven arrived bearing Prince Doran Martell's seal from Sunspear, carried north across half a world on relay wings. It offered cautious alliance. Grain stores from the Red Mountains, possibly spears if northern lords acknowledged Martell grievances against the Iron Throne. Wyman grunted at the politics, but Davos argued every bushel counted. Sansa drafted reply by lamplight, weaving words of shared loss. Elia, Rhaenys, Jon, younger generation forging path beyond the sins of fathers. Whether a Dornish ship could reach White Harbor before ice broke was uncertain, but letters cost less than lances and might harvest faith. Meanwhile, Samwell's second raven reached Winterfell, reporting successful contact with Maester Wolkan at Greywater Watch and confirmation that dragonglass loads near Dragonstone were accessible with modest picks. Wyman Manderley clapped fat hands together, vowing to overhaul fishing boats into crude mining dredgers. Word spread by quick. Black blades might end ice demons. Men who had scoffed at white tails now looked westward with hungry eyes, imagining daggers of obsidian shearing through frost-rimmed necks. As the moon slid toward vernal equinox, warmth lingered hours longer each evening. Yet with the warmth came mists thick as curtains, rolling across valleys and cloaking patrols until screams cut air and died without echo. The first casualty lists arrived from the Bar Rolands. 20 spearmen found gnawed to bone. 6 archers vanished. A courier discovered frozen mid-stride, face pale blue, sword still sheathed. Sansa convened Emergency Strategy Council. They decreed scouts travel only in pairs, each with an obsidian shard around the neck. Night watches tripled. Blacksmiths worked around the clock forging dragonglass arrowheads secured by Lennox oil to prevent shattering on release. On a slate-gray morning, horns moaned along Winterfell's walls. Shapes gathered at the tree line, hundreds, maybe more, silent as snowfall. Eyes like lantern shards glittered, fixed upon ramparts. A pall of chill quivered above them, air sharper than sand-scoured glass. They stood in ranks, semblance of ancient discipline, as though commanded by memory of war. Among them towered a figure crowned in branching ice, sword etched with runes too cold for living sight. The Night King himself, some whispered, though few had beheld him and lived. He raised an arm, limbs moving with agonizing slowness, joints cracking like breaking branches, and the host advanced as one. Arrows flew from walls, carrying flickers of crystalline shards. Some found marks. Whites shattered like brittle dolls. Yet where one fell, two more pressed. Umber war horns bellowed. Manderley trebuchets hurled barrels of pitch that burst in sheets of flame, carving fiery scars into the surge. Fire slowed them but would not starve them. Sansa stood atop the east tower with Lyanna and Davos, cloak snapping. Below, soldiers scrambled to man catwalks, to drag boiling water cauldrons, to steady, trembling hands. She watched the Night King stride across open field, ice not melting beneath ancient boots, and felt marrow congeal. Memory throbbed. Bran's tales of weirwood visions, of the first long night when the dead rose beneath starless skies. She had once dismissed them as nursemaids' horrors. Now they were footfalls drumming closer. She turned to Davos. Signal the reserves. All men to walls. Tormund and Asha hold gates. If breach seems near, fall back to inner keep. Davos saluted, vanished down stone steps. Lyanna unsheathed a short sword edged in dragonglass, blade humming like trapped wind. For a heartbeat they stood alone above Winterfell's ancient stones, two women of Starks by blood and by oath, bearing the whole of the north upon slim shoulders. Snowflakes began to fall slow, deliberate, each flake sharp enough to cut. Below, the living braced. Above, the dead marched. And in the silent span between heartbeats, Sansa prayed not for victory but for endurance, for dawn, for one more breath to keep alive Jon Snow's impossible dream, that a broken land might unite long enough to choose life over death, memory over oblivion. She tightened gloved fingers on the parapet, drew breath that burned like ice, and gave the order to loose every arrow, every stone, every ounce of courage left within Wint. Urfel's battered walls. The storm answered, howling through merlins, whipping cloaks into snapping pennants. The battle for the north had reached its final crucible, and beneath the weirwood's bleeding leaves the ashes of a silent king smoldered unseen, as though even in death Jon Snow lent secret warmth to those who still dared defy the night. The first wave of dead struck the outer ramparts like an ocean of broken glass, brittle bodies snapping upon stone yet surging onward through their own debris. Men atop the wall swung scythes rigged on hempen ropes. An old Night's Watch trick Davos had resurrected from dusty annals, and sent sheaves of corpses tumbling back into the mass below. Every impact rang out with eerie hollowness, as though the bodies were gourds left to freeze and crack. The gaps they left filled instantly. Spears of dragonglass thrust down, punched through eye sockets, burst faint auras of pale rime that hissed away on contact with warmer air. For each white destroyed, another climbed, fingers clawing stone without heed to splintered bone. The moat that Ramsay had once clogged with corpses turned black with writhing limbs seeking purchase. Sansa moved along the parapet with firm, measured pace, cloak snapping like a banner of night-furred wings. Ghost padded behind her, white coat soaked through, each movement scattering rubies of blood and sapphire shards of ice. Archers bowed at her passing, arrow after arrow whispering from you, and she answered with stillness, neither flinching nor ducking, because the sight of her steady poise carried men through dread more surely than any shouted cheer. Below, at the central gate, Asha Greyjoy commanded a knot of shield-bearers who formed a living hinge. Their task was to swing the battered oak leaves back into place each time Mag the Mighty or one of the Umber Giants kicked a mound of dead clear. The collision of ice flesh against ironwood created a rhythm like a forge hammer. Slam, scrape, thud, grunt, that beat time to heartbeats burning themselves dry. When a horse-sized polar bear, its hide sloughing in wet sheets, reared against the timbers and sent 3 ironborn staggering, Asha vaulted the parapet on a rope, landed atop the beast's spine, hacked twice at the neck with a fresh-forged glaive of black glass welded to Valyrian steel shards. The bear's head came off like a rotten pumpkin and tumbled into the churn, jaws still snapping. Wild cheers rose along the wall. Somewhere above, a horn answered. Not the Watch's mournful call, but a shorter, sharper flourish that Tormund had adopted to rally free folk. The Night King advanced at an unhurried gait, his commanders arrayed like frozen obelisks around him. Each time a dragonglass spear felled a lieutenant, pale creature helmed in hoar iron, eyes shards of moon. The corpse burst with a plume of ice dust that drifted across the field and coalesced into fresh foot soldiers. Davos, watching through a slit in the inner keep, understood then why the first long night had nearly swallowed the world. The dead were a wound that bled warriors. Close the gash or the battlefield would drown. He ducked back from the murder hole just as a shard of black ice burst through, spinning like a crossbow bolt, embedding in the lintel where his nose had been. A second shard followed, whistling down the corridor to crack a lantern and plunge the passage into smoky dark. He cursed softly, hefted a pike with glass barbs, and hurried toward the weirwood courtyard where Sansa had ordered the reserves. Reed marshrunners, Manderley stewards, a clutch of smiths still in soot-streaked aprons, held back as final shield. There he found Melisandre. The Red Woman appeared like a bloodstain blooming on snow, her crimson silks incongruous amid wool and mail, her cheeks flushed with cold or fervor, eyes alight with something that was not entirely the reflection of torches. Davos's steps slowed. The last time he had seen her, she rode from Castle Black in silence, dreams of fire as stale as the ashes in Jon's pyre. "You've chosen your moment," he muttered. "I was told to choose," she replied. Her breath plumed frost, though her gown left shoulders bare. By flames yet burning in lands unseen, Davos heard distant screams, the timbery groan of the gate straining. "If you can burn the Night King out of the sky, now's the hour. Light and shadow wage war beyond war," she murmured. "The true fire is faith." Then she raised her arms and began to chant. Davos expected a torrent of flame to answer, but what came was subtler. The torches lining the courtyard flared, brightening from dull ember to star white, casting swords and helms into stark silhouette. Sparks lifted, eddied, did not fade. Soldiers paused, staring up as the sparks drifted higher and congregated in a loose spiral, a swarm of candleflies kindling above the heart tree. The air warmed. Steam hissed from snow underfoot. Even Davos, skeptic forged of salt and pragmatism, felt hair prickle along his arms. Melisandre's voice rose. The sparks fused, gathered mass until they became motes of molten gold. They drifted outward, slow but purposeful, toward the walls, toward the teeming ranks of whites beating against Winterfell's skin. Where each sphere settled upon a corpse, it sank like brand into parchment. The body convulsed, blue fire guttered, and then the fragile tissue blackened not with freezing but with a heat that left only snowmelt steam. Across the ramparts, men cried out in astonishment as volleys of living flame joined their defense. For the first time, undead ranks recoiled. Gaps opened in the tide. Yet the Night King halted, raised his frost-forged blade, and drove its tip into the earth. The ground sighed. The sparks winked, dimmed, sputtered, each extinguished by an unseen hand. Silence returned, heavier. Melisandre swayed, knees buckling. Davos caught her elbow. "Is that all?" he rasped. "The Lord's fire dims." Her lips paled. "I have a last ember, but its cost." A horn brayed thrice from the western watch. Davos felt the courtyard tilt with sudden dread as a fresh cry echoed. The dead were scaling the inner wall. He left the Red Woman kneeling and sprinted, boots skidding on slush, up the nearest stair. At the summit he saw white shapes cresting Merlin's long held secure. Mormont women fought like cornered lions, bucklers raised, short swords punching into frozen flesh, but numbers pressed. One white in tattered maester robes clutched the chain from an ironmongery and swung it like a flail, cracking helms. Davos jammed his pike through its spine. The creature folded with a crunch, but a gaunt child wearing the face of a girl he'd once bought clams from at Bravo's leapt onto the shaft. He choked on horror, swept the half sideways, flinging her into the pit below. No time to think of who she'd been. Survival was mercy now. Through gaps he glimpsed the Night King striding nearer the gate still. A circle of his lieutenants fell behind, perhaps wary of the flames, perhaps to preserve him for some darker purpose. He raised his blade again. Snow eddied upward in a spiral around him, white devils twisting skyward. When he lowered the weapon, the snow coalesced into spear-length shards of translucent ice that hovered for a heartbeat before hurtling toward the walls. Sansa ducked as one shard screamed past, shearing a crenel top like cheese. A second stabbed between Merlin's, impaled a bannerman at her side. Blood fountained, froze midair. She stood, though her ears rang, and shouted orders to archers. "Loose at the king!" Fletch every glass arrow in his heart. Shafts streaked, some striking the swirling ward of snow that spun about him, shattering into dust. Others found bodies of lesser wights, pinning them to the icy ground. She saw Royce rallying Vale men behind Pavis's scarred by earlier bolts. She saw Lyanna, blade flickering black star rays, carve a path across a catwalk half-collapsed. The girl's eyes glowed with something beyond fury, a clarity of purpose older than her house. Crack, the east tower shook. A giant wight hammered at its base, skull bare, one eye socket streaming powdery snow. Umbers flung firepots of oil. The giant batted them away. Asha shouted for ropes. Iron grapnels bit into the tower's waist, and Ironborn hauled sideways, pulling like ship crews tacking against storm. With a groan, the tower toppled outward, crushing giant and a dozen undead. But the wall now bore a cratered gap. Through that breach, the Night King glimpsed the courtyard, the heart tree, the heroes behind it. He advanced step by implacable step. Sansa felt his gaze, colder than any winter she'd known. She looked for Davos, for Tormund, anyone to hold that breach, but men were scattered, lines fraying. Melisandre staggered from the Godswood arch, lips cracked. She saw the white shadow approaching and raised shaky hands. "Davos Seaworth," she croaked. He heard, hesitated. She pointed at herself, then at the tree. "Sacrifice," she whispered. "A king's blood once woke shadows, but now a king's memory may light dawn." Her eyes settled on the ashen pit where Jon's pyre had burned. Davos understood with a lurch. No, but the red woman staggered past him before he could block. She crossed fallen branches, snow turning scarlet as her feet bled on splinters. The Night King halted at sight of her. Perhaps he recognized an enemy of ancient wars. Perhaps he saw only a warm thing to quench. He lifted his sword. Melisandre pressed a hand to the charred wood dusting the ground, whispered a prayer older than Valyrian roads, and struck flint. Sparks danced into the powdery ash of Jon Snow, flared gold. A column of flame roared upward, taller than gatehouses, a spear of dawn in night's throat. Fire slammed against the Night King's frost wall. Steam exploded. The courtyard vanished in boiling fog. Men cried out, blinded. The roar receded. When vapor thinned, the Night King stood where he had, frost mantle cracked, yet blades still poised. But the lieutenant's circle at his back lay in shards, melted edges steaming, and the breach was glassed with molten snow fused to stone. For this respite, Melisandre had given her breath. She knelt amid embers, hair blazing red in final light, eyes dimmed. She exhaled once, and the flame guttered. A hush fell across the field. Even the undead paused, as though listening to an unheard call. Then, from atop the inner rampart, Lyanna Mormont lifted her dragonglass sword high. "The dawn takes back the night." Her voice cracked across walls, over corpses and living alike. Soldiers cheered, renewed, surging to plug smaller breaches, to shove back wandering dead. Arrows rained again. Firepots tumbled, shattered in green-orange tongues. The Night King turned, withdrew his blade from the fused earth, and signaled. The dead host wheeled, not retreating but repositioning, sliding around Winterfell's flanks like a glacier-bending stone. Sansa saw his purpose. They would encircle, force the garrison into exhaustion. Food dwindled, arrows fewer. They could not withstand days. She descended to the courtyard, voice hoarse, and found Davos at the burning stump where Melisandre lay still. Together they knelt. Davos closed the woman's eyes. "She bought us ours," he said. "Ours are all lives ever are," Sansa murmured. She rose. "Raven to White Harbor. Order Manderly's ships here, archers aboard. Royce must ride with every spare mount to intercept." Davos squeezed her arm. "The sea's still ice-locked. Those ships won't reach in time." "Then we bring Dragonfire," she whispered. "But no dragons remain within leagues," he began, then stilled as her meaning dawned. The dragonglass mine at Dragonstone lay weeks distant, but there was a different flame nearer. Wildfire, rumored caches left since Aegon's sons marched north after Harrenhal burned. Old maesters told of sealed vaults beneath Winterfell, forgotten by Starks, hidden for centuries. Sansa looked toward the ruins of the collapsed East Tower where subterranean tunnels once led to hot springs. "If we pour dragonfire beneath the ground," she said, "we can shatter the plate the Night King stands upon. Fire from below, ice above." Davos considered. The springs still flowed warm. Steam vents riddled the crypt depths. "You'd risk collapsing Winterfell on our own heads. Better ashes than graves of ice," she returned. They set to work. Glover miners and Ironborn sappers descended through warrens half-suicidal. Reed men slipped through vents with skins of lamp oil mixed from rendered whales. Any sealed jar bearing wildfire markings was interred in carts, rolled along rickety tracks once used to haul masonry. Ghost prowled behind, senses quivering. He refused to leave Jon's melted ashes, so the task moved literally beneath his watchful eyes. Above, the dead reformed lines and renewed assaults. The western wall, undermanned after losses, became a focal point. Royce rallied Vale Knights for a sortie intended to buy Sansa time. They lowered a drawbar section and galloped forth into the snow sheen. Horse hooves churned corpses into slush while lances splintered through brittle ribcages. Royce's green-scaled armor gleamed beneath moon, but soon his column bogged in the press. Arrows of black ice lanced from new white archers perched on frozen willows. Knights fell, mail shattered, but they held long enough for archers on ramparts to thin ranks with blazing pitch arrows. Within tunnels, oil fumes thickened. Sappers slathered wildfire jars in clay, whispered prayers to river gods, to the drowned, to nameless forces. At the deepest spur, they found ancient brickwork bearing scorched sigils of three-headed dragons. The bricks rang hollow. Under torchlight, they smashed through to a cavern pocket. Shelves stacked with crystal jars of pale green syrup. Smell alone made eyes water. They loaded 9, 10, 11, the maximum a handcart could bear without sagging. Davos oversaw final placement. "We break earth beneath the courtyard, vent the springs upward," he told Tormund, who had volunteered to push the cart. "Then we run like bastards from a pox house." Tormund grinned, teeth blood-stained. "Running I can do." Together they heaved the cart along rails, wheels squealing protest. Above-ground Sansa prepared withdrawal of wall defenders to Inner Bailey, a feigned sign of weakness to lure the Night King into the courtyard. She signaled horns, 3 longs, 2 shorts, rehearsed earlier for retreat. Archers abandoned parapets, falling back across bridges, slamming doors. Onlookers might think Winterfell broken. The Night King advanced, frost cloak trailing. The host followed, stepping over mounds of destroyed brethren. Through the half-demolished gate he entered, strides echoing. His presence devoured sound. The groan of settling beams, the drip of blood, all hushed. Sansa watched from the broken maester's rookery high above the yard. She could not see Davos's lantern code in tunnels, but she trusted. Davos and Tormund reached a central junction where spring water hissed through a centuries-old breach. Steam fogged their vision. Davos splashed oil in a tide across bricks. Tormund used a pick to widen cracks. One jar they kept unopened. They jammed the cart wheels, wedged fuses of boiling rope. Above, the Night King halted at the heart tree. He extended a gauntlet. Frost crept along bark. Leaves shriveled to white husks. Sansa whispered, "Now." Davos struck flint. Fuse flared. "Run!" They sprinted along tunnel, echo of boots drowned by hiss. Fuse spat sparks, racing toward soaked bricks. In the yard, dead ranks stilled. Some tilted heads as though hearing subterranean whisper. Asha, hidden behind portcullis slats, felt warmth underfoot and dove backward shouting. The ground erupted. First a gout of superheated steam blasted through frozen earth, flinging chunks the size of sheep. Then the wildfire jars burst. Green hellfire spewed in fountains, igniting steam, flash-boiling snow. Shockwave lifted bodies, living and dead, hurled them against walls. The heart tree vanished behind a column of green flame that twisted upward like some giant serpent. The Night King stood at epicenter. Fire engulfed him, an unworldly brightness both emerald and gold. For a heartbeat, he appeared etched in glass, arms spread, sword raised. crystal cracks spidery across his armor, a network of fissures glowing white. Then a sound like shattering glaciers boomed. The figure convulsed. Walls shuddered, ramparts fractured. Yet the inner keep, built round natural rock, held. When fire subsided, there was a crater seething with steam, water pouring from ruptured springs, cooling magma of fused stone. At its rim lay shards of wrought frost that once were a crown. No sign of the Night King's body remained. Across the courtyard, wights tottered, aimless. Their blue irises flickered, dimmed, guttered. One by one they collapsed like marionettes with strings severed. Beyond walls, the sea of undead stilled and toppled. A harvest felled in a single sweep. Silence crushed Winterfell. Then Ghost howled, a low, mournful note that rose to joyous crescendo. Sansa descended shaky stairs as survivors emerged, blinking, soot-faced, to view the ruin. She met Davos at the crater's edge, his hair singed, eyebrows half gone. They exchanged a look beyond words and understood breath still belonged to lungs. The living tallied loss. Half the garrison lay dead or near. The east wall sagged. The gods wood scorched. Yet dawn bled across the horizon. The first true dawn in memory without fell chill. Tormund carried Melisandre's body to the courtyard rim, burned again upon spare pyre wood. Flames curled about crimson silk. Sparks drifted upward as though seeking someone now gone. Later, they gathered in the great hall with doors flung wide to new sun. Snowmelt dripped through roof holes, pattering onto rushes. Sansa stood before them, voice raw. "We live because every name etched on stone kept faith." She gestured to the blackened patch where Jon's ashes rested. "We live because one man's memory lit fires in our hearts. Let us rebuild not on vengeance, but on the pack that endures." Lyanna raised sword, tip bright. "Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, Queen of the North," she declared. Thunder of voices answered, wild and fierce and weary. Sansa bowed head, tears forming, then spoke oath, to guard each valley and island, each pledge and hearth. She named Davos Hand of the Queen, named Royce Shield of the Vale, Manderly Warden of the White Knife, Asha Captain of Northern Seas. She freed free folk to settle lands south of the Wall, promising equal bread for equal toil. She offered amnesty to surviving Karstarks and Freys who swore to plant trees in graves of those they'd wronged. Outside, Ghost nosed the melted snow, sniffed ashes. He padded to the feast yard where children chased each other with wooden swords and nudged a red-haired girl until she laughed. He looked north once, to the wall hidden beyond hills, then back at Winterfell. The wind carried faint scents of smokewood, of brewing stew, of thawing earth. Spring would be hard. Crops must be sown in fields salted by blood. Walls would need fresh stone hauled from quarries. But songs already sparked in barracks, half-remembered tunes retold of a wolf king who died, yet whose death unified hearts sharper than steel. Bards would sing of the queen whose cloak was dire wolf shadow, whose voice cracked but did not break, and of a night that ended not by dragon roar but by the courage of ordinary blades. Far in the vaults, wildfire still slept in dark niches. Sansa ordered them sealed with stone and runes, and keys broken into fragments to be scattered across rivers, because some fires belonged only to endings, not beginnings. She walked the godswood where charred stumps sprouted the first shoots of red leaf, life seeded by flame. Touching tender leaves, she whispered a prayer in the old tongue she barely understood. The leaves rustled like distant applause. Evenings she sat upon the ramparts and wrote letters, one to Samwell praising his scholarship, begging maesters to speed the farming guides he promised, one to Doran Martell accepting shipments of citrus and promising northern timber in return, one to King's Landing's new regent, Tommen grown to wary adolescence, demanding recognition of the North's sovereignty. Into each she wove the same thread. We stand united, by choice, by memory of a bastard who proved worth matters more than birth. When her ink ran dry, she paused, quill hovering over parchment. She regarded the stillness beyond walls, the way snow gleamed pink under sunset. She penned one last line not for any courier. "Jon, if there is a realm beyond walls of bone, know your king there too. She sealed no wax, kept the scrap folded against her breast. Night settled gentle for once. No howling winds, no dead at the gate. Fires burned warm, voices rose in softer songs. Asha taught Manderley lads a salt reef shanty. Reed women danced reels slow and strange. Vale squires tried northern ale and swore never to return south. Sansa drifted to sleep in a chamber overlooking the gods' wood. Ghost curled at her feet. Dreams came filled with green plains, with laughter echoing through corridors rebuilt, with children chasing direwolves beneath blooming red leaves. And though the dream faded with dawn, the warmth lingered, steady as a heart forged by winter yet beating still, promising that the story of snow and night, of pack and promise, would carry on, long after ice swords fell silent, long after queens and lords turned to dust. Carried on in every hearth where folk spoke the simple words that had saved them. The North remembers. Mist, heavy with newborn warmth, drifted across Winterfell's courtyards in wide silver lakes that lapped against scorched stone and soot-stained towers. Dawn after dawn, as hatchling sunrays grew bold enough to gild the ramparts, Sansa would rise before the cooks lit their first fires and walk the battlements barefoot, feeling rough crenellations bite her soles, tasting the cold promise of spring on her tongue. Where ash lay thickest she knelt, pressed a palm into charcoal dust left by wildfire and remembered Jon's pyre. From that scalding memory she drew resolve. From the quiet hush of thawing ice she drew patience. From the scent of wet timber she drew the certainty that nothing, not even a night without stars, lasted forever. By the third week after victory, the crater where the heart tree had once reached crimson fingers toward the sky was no longer a smoking wound. Reed crannogmen and Mormont carpenters worked side by side, laying ring upon ring of living birch stripped from island shores and marshbanks, binding them with weirwood saplings that Bran the Builder himself might have recognized. No red leaves yet fluttered there. Those would grow in their time, but the beginnings of a new godswood took root, watered by buckets hauled from unfrozen springs now rushing bright beneath the castle's belly. Some called it sacrilege to fashion the old gods with mortal hands. Sansa called it duty. The North required symbols as surely as it required grain. Grain, however, arrived more slowly than symbols. Winterfell cellars held only enough oats and barley for another month of half rations. White Harbor's storehouses overflowed with salted cod and rye, but the sea ice still gripped the merman's spear in iron jaws. Davos dispatched narwhal-skinned coracles piloted by riverfolk adept at threading fissures. They ferried each bolt of grain wrapped in oiled linen across white labyrinths where cracks snapped like crossbows under each step. Of 6 coracles sent on the first run, 3 returned, hulls splintered, crews frostbitten but triumphant, holds swelling with sacks. At their acclaim Davos only shook his head. The cost of bread now measured in fingers lost to cold. North of the wall, news spread as swift as breath in winter. Wildling scouts had watched the Night King's host crumble from distant ridges, seen the sky above Winterfell ignite emerald, heard thunder that split the horizon. Some wept, others laughed hollowly, many merely stared. There were stories of white wolves wandering alone through snowfields, sniffing at bodies whose eyes flickered and died. Tormund dispatched word to every clan still lingering east of the Shivering Sea. The wall's south face welcomed them. At Castle Black, Alliser Thorne, haggard, left with fewer than 100 brothers, resented the influx but could not deny the watch needed hands to mend creaking gates and clear drifts taller than horses. By strange twist, the free folk began patching breaches in the same rampart that had once barred their escape, singing low songs of summer meadows they had never seen while ranger recruits muttered grudging thanks. Southward, fire gossip wandered the roads faster than ravens. At the twins' Walder Frey, old bones propped on cushions of sullen silk, heard of the Frey Lannister rout and spat clots into a goblet of spiced wine. He sent demands to King's Landing for recompense, only to receive silence wrapped in Lannister wax. The crown weighed its own woes, still reeling from Qyburn's disquieting whisper that dragons had crossed the narrow sea and laid waste to a Volantene fleet. Walder read no dragons in the parchment, but he sensed winds shifting. House Frey, afloat on a river of grudges and fragile alliances, quavered at the thought of dire wolves reborn. He ordered fresh guards on every gatehouse, but his sons grumbled. Sons who had lost cousins beneath Nye's ridge, who nursed arrow scars blackened by northern venom scars, who muttered about vengeance grown too costly. Cracks, hairline at first spread. In the Vale, Peter Baelish played a subtler game. After Winterfell's triumph he lingered, offering counsel to Sansa over flickering hearths, praising her command and slipping rumors to her ear. Whispers that Cersei plotted a northern invasion, that Euron Greyjoy's ships ranged the western reaches, that old houses balked at a queen unwed. Sansa listened, eyes half-lidded. She let him speak of marriage alliances, his clever designs weaving her to Robin Arryn, to a Reach Lord's vassal, even to Asha should tongues permit, anything to anchor her rule. Then, in the hush before dawn, she confided in Davos. Together they drafted new laws proclaiming that any northern noble of male or female line could inherit if chosen by clan council. Tradition bent, not broken, and the decree undermined Baelish's mischief. Her legitimacy would not hinge on husbands. That same decree granted free folk equal protection, provided they swore guest rights and tilled northern soil. When it passed at Moot beneath the nascent birch godswood, Tormund roared with delight, lifted Lyanna Mormont off her feet until her laughter rang like hammered copper. Some old lords bristled, especially Glover men still blaming wildlings for raided orchards decades past. But faced with Lyanna's glare, Royce's steely nod, and Davos's calm logic, dissent quietened. Sansa had learned that power often whispered loudest in unexpected voices. Still, storms brewed. A fortnight after the decree, a rider pounded into Winterfell's courtyard, horse lathered, bearing a sealed scroll from Eastwatch by the Sea. The Watch's beacons had sighted sails under Kraken banners. Euron's war party, rumored to seek the still smoldering remains of the Night King for trophy or sorcery. Worse, scouts believed the Ironborn intended to raid Last Hearth's granaries, now heavy with umber grain meant for Winterfell. Sansa convened council at once. Asha slammed fist against table. Kraken guts will grease my oars. Royce favored riding heavy cavalry through the Gift to flank them inland. Davos suggested a bolder move. Lure them upriver where thin ice masked jagged rocks. Their debate cut through dusk until Sansa traced a finger across the map's curling parchment. We defend Last Hearth by denying Euron the river mouth, she decided. Asha will command Manderley barges reinforced with umber timber, sail north to choke the shivering sound with scuttled hulks. Royce rides south along King's Road to draw Euron's outriders into the Gifts bogs. She turned to Tormund. You and the free folk harry their rear from the rills, strike camps at night. No pitched battle. Bleed them until iron rusts in their wounds. Plans set, horns echoed through halls. By moon's high, columns marched beneath torch glow, leaving Winterfell guarded by reed archers and the recovering. Spring's edge cut roads into quagmire. Still Euron sailed swift, longships knifing between ice floes with unsettling ease. Lightning's Claw, his flagship, bore sails woven of flayed leviathan skin, and at prow a black iron figurehead. Some said shaped like his own sneering face, bit into sea spray. He raided a clutch of fisher huts north of Skagos first, impaling survivors on spears of whalebone appended in tide pools. News arrived at White Harbor, panicking merchants. Manderley's eldest son Wylus commandeered every vessel, conscripted carpenters, armed townsfolk to man ballistae on rooftops. The harbor's mouth bristled like a hedgehog, yet it was in the twisting estuary of the White Knife that Euron's luck soured. Asha's scuttled barges narrowed the channel until his largest longships foundered, keels scraping iron-hard rock hidden half a span beneath green water. As hull planks ruptured, river torrents swallowed holds laden with plunder. Ironborn leapt overboard but found arrows raining from muddy banks where wildling bowwomen lay prone amidst reeds. In the chaos, Tormund's raiding party slipped from birch cloisters and set smaller vessels aflame, pitch pots bursting into orange flowers that reflected hellfire upon swirling current. Royce's knights, arriving in a thunder of hooves, cut down stragglers scrabbling to muddy shorelines. By next dusk, 3 Kraken banners smoldered on spits, and Euron's remaining ships fled eastward, half-crews rowing through a sleet storm while Asha's sails pursued like gray ghosts. Euron escaped, Some said on the back of a sea dragon summoned from black depths, others on the wings of madness. But his defeat forged solidarity between clans still hesitant to trust Ironborn or free folk. Sansa capitalized swiftly. She ordered joint patrols along coastlines, pairing Manderly stewards with Ironborn deckhands, free folk hunters with Glover trackers. Suspicion eased in shared campfires where stories swapped. Wildlings gawped at tales of sea serpents. Fisher boys learned the names of snows that whispered across Frostfang spires. While borderlands rallied, letters arrived from Old Town Thick with Maester Archibald's wax. Samwell's research on dragonglass had borne fruit. Powdered shards, mixed with lime and pine resin, could coat steel heads without shattering upon impact. Moreover, powdered dragonglass in small quantities, dissolved in vinegar, created a tincture lethal to white flesh, penetrating skin to crystallize marrow. Sansa read the recipe thrice, then dispatched Glover messengers to quarries near Skagos, and smiths to craft prototype arrowheads under Reed's supervision. Ghost, often nosing workshop doors, would sneeze at acrid fumes then settle, white tail twitching. Time marched. The sun climbed higher each day, yet storms of politics brewed to rival any winter gale. Across the neck, House Tyrell, led now by Marjorie-crowned queen beside Tommen after Cersei's quiet demise by inducement of her own wildfire caches, petitioned for grain shipments to feed the capital, ravaged by riots and short harvests. In exchange, they offered gold and knights. Sansa deliberated. Gold meant little if fields lay barren again. Knights might bleed north for a crown that had seldom bled for them. She proposed instead a pact. Tyrell envoys would teach southern crop rotation methods suited to re-arable lands, and the north would send surplus oats once reserves sat secure. Marjorie, pragmatic, agreed, dispatching a retinue of gardeners and engineers north along roiling rivers. King Tommen, still green, signed with relief. During these brightening months, Sansa rarely slept full nights. Dreams wandered shadowed corridors. She walked crypt tunnels lit by flickering torches, past stone likenesses of Ned, Robb, even a sculpted Bran though he lived still beyond the wall, and always at corridor's end found Jon's alcove empty, his statue unfinished, dust collecting where marble hands should rest upon broadsword. She would reach out, and the alcove filled with swirling snow that coalesced into his face. Eyes gentle, no blue frost but brown warmth. He said nothing. He never had to, and each time she woke with tears dried to salt along cheeks, heart aching not with grief now, but with longing softened by acceptance. He had given his last breath so the North could draw new ones. Her task was to ensure each breath counted. One dawn, as sky blushed rose above Wolf's Tooth Ridge, a gatehouse tower bell tolled slow, deep. A single rider approached, cloak of white and red sewn in a pattern unfamiliar. Lyanna Mormont rode out to meet him with 2 bear-pelt guards. Minutes later, she escorted him before Sansa. He bowed low, revealing hair of midnight spill, eyes vault blue. His dialect held the water-smooth cadence of Essos. He introduced himself as Ser Jorah Mormont, once exiled, now emissary of Daenerys of House Targaryen, breaker of chains, queen of Dragonstone. Behind him, 3 smaller riders guided mounts burdened with sacks shimmering gold. Jorah unlashed a sack, spilled jet-black ingots across the dais. Dragonglass refined by dragonflame, each bar etched with high Valyrian runes. At mention of dragons, every hall whisper hush. Jorah relayed Daenerys' pledge, an alliance forged of shared blood, stark loyalty to Targaryen kings of old, and shared purpose. The final embers of Long Night might flare again in far-flung pockets. In return for northern support should the Iron Throne oppose her return, Daenerys offered half her obsidian stores, learned alchemists, and, if needed, a flight of dragonfire to defending skies. He spoke too of Tyrion Lannister serving as her hand, of unsullied ranks drilled to precision, of free cities trembling. Some lords bristled at mention of Lannister, but Davos counseled restraint. Vengeance mattered less than future. Manderly murmured of seas reopened for trade. Asha's mind filled with visions of kraken banners burning under dragon wings. Sansa asked to think. That night she walked battlements with Ser Jorah. He spoke of Jon, recalling watchful eyes at Castle Black, courage beyond rank. His voice cracked when Sansa recounted Jon's last stand, prisoner to both duty and treachery. Stars wheeled overhead, silent witness. Before dawn's lavender light, she agreed to meet Daenerys at Moat Cailin come mid-spring to discuss an accord. Whispers flew south and east. Queen meets queen. Peter Baelish saw his net strain. A northern realm unified under dragons would require no silver-tongued bauble. He retreated to the Eyrie, guiding gullible Robin to issue demands for Sansa's safe return. The Raven found Sansa midday between smithy and stables. She shared the letter with Lyanna. They laughed until ribs ached. Yet Davos advised caution. Baelish's snares cut deepest when ignored. Sansa penned a reply in formal courtesy, inviting Robin to attend the spring moot as honored cousin, escorted by his regent, who should travel unarmed. She sealed it with direwolf wax and a sprig of birch from the new godswood. In Castle Black, another letter arrived for Maester Mully. Bran Stark sought passage south. He had seen the northern victory in a dream of ravens and flame. He traveled with Mira Reed and a retinue of children of the forest, yes, living embodiments of legend, intent to offer knowledge of weirwood webbing and ancient wards. Thorne, begrudgingly humbled, granted safe conduct, dispatching rangers to guide them through passes where white carcasses lay still. Rumor outran them. The last Greenseer walked again. Weeks later, when Bran's small host arrived at Winterfell, bells pealed across courtyards bright with early flowers forcing through dirt. Bran rode a palanquin woven of heartwood roots carried by shaggy northern elk. Sansa rushed from dais, knelt before brother grown ethereal. He touched her brow, eyes milky with distance yet shimmering with affection. Around them people knelt, uncertain whether to honor child or spirit. Bran spoke softly. The tree remembers, and the pack lives. He asked first to see the new birch godswood. When he laid hands on young trunks, red veins bloomed through bark, leaves unfurling crimson in a single breath as if a century passed under his fingertips. Witnesses gasped. Some wept. The old gods breathed again, no longer silent. Council reconvened with Bran seated on woven throne beside Sansa. His presence shifted debates. When he spoke of political machinations unknown, he revealed glimpses of truths none could challenge. He exposed a plot of Umber cousins to sell last hearth stores to Essos smugglers, exposed Baelish's scheme to poison Manderley envoys, even revealed hidden wildfire casks beneath the twins. With each revelation, trust in his sight deepened, and with trust came unity wrought of awe. Mid-spring bloomed. Moat Cailin's swamp slow gurgled while purple windflowers dotted causeways where iron spikes once barred entry. Here Sansa met Daenerys Targaryen. The Dragon Queen arrived astride Drogon, dark wings eclipsing sun, shadow swallowing moss-slick towers. Northerners flinched but held ranks. Sansa stood calm, hair braided with weirwood ribbon. Ghost at heel, she walked forward as Drogon bowed scaled head, nostrils steaming. She lifted a gloved hand, touched ridged snout. Cold nose warmed under her palm. Daenerys dismounted, violet eyes searching. Words between queens flowed measured as thaw streams. Pledges of mutual defense, respect for sovereignty, open trade routes. Northern furs for Bay of Dragon silk, obsidian for iron ore. Sansa accepted Daenerys's right to press claim on Iron Throne, but only with northern independence guaranteed. Tyrion, leaner, eyes bright with curiosity, negotiated specifics with Davos until both scribbled parchment of 6 signatures. Direwolf, dragon, kraken, bear, merman, lion. Asha volunteered her fastest raider as courier to King's Landing, carrying terms. Marjorie's counsel responded cautiously, but Tommen, advised by Grand Maester Pycelle's replacement, an earnest woman named Clarice, saw the writing. War with united North and dragons spelled ruin. Talks began for a great council to draft a new compact of realms, a confederation rather than fealty. Throughout negotiations, Bran wandered Moat's weirwood remnants, fingers sliding across spear-scarred bark. He communed with children of forest perched like living statues. One dusk he sought Daenerys in forgotten courtyard where pitch marsh suppressed footsteps. He spoke of the wheel she longed to break, of the webs linking men to past sins. She listened grave, asked what price. He replied, "To wield dragonflame without binding your own heart in chain." She pondered long, then walked into the night where Drogon guarded ramparts, sat beneath his wing, watching stars fall. Peace, fragile, blossomed. In Winterfell villagers planted barley. Wildling children herded goats across meadows. Ironborn repaired fisher wharfs. Maesters taught letters to bare-pelted youths. Slowly laughter outnumbered sobs among rubble. Yet under all tugged one more thread, justice for the North's tour. Mentors, Ramsay dead, Roosa's bones interred in unmarked field, but Walder Frey still lived. Cersei's wildfire caches remained hidden. Clutches of Bolton men roved, raiding hamlets. Sansa convened a tribunal beneath New Godswood. Bran presiding, Davos recorded, Manderley and Lyanna judging. News spread, and those accused of crimes came summoned or in chains. One morning, Peter Baelish stood before them. He arrived escorted by Vale knights yet unarmed. Bran's eyes glazed white. Ravens shrieked. Scenes spilled. Baelish betraying Ned, whispering poison to Lisa, dagger plots. Sansa's heart quivered but hardened. Verdict: death for treason, but mercy spared Robin. Baelish would meet the blade alone. Execution fell swift. Blade of Valyrian steel wielded by Lyanna, whose arm did not tremble. The Vale bowed to Winterfell afterward, pledging fealty to Queen they once deemed fragile. As summer solstice approached, Sansa walked the field beyond Winterfell where rows of cairns marked fallen. Mormont shield maidens, Umbers, wildling archers, ironborn deckhands, unnamed children frozen or burned. Bran joined, wheeled by Mira. He told of visions where their ancestors stood proud behind them, where Jon walked endless snows smiling. Sansa asked if Jon had message. Bran closed eyes, lips parted. He says, "You did not kneel. You stood." Tears welled. She whispered thank you to wind. In months following, dragon shadows crossed northern skies often, yet never with dread. Children pointed, cheered. Farms flourished under deeper topsoil tilled by freedmen from Slaver's Bay seeking new life. Schoolhouses opened in White Harbor teaching both Southern script and runes of first men. The Night's Watch, reduced but undaunted, rebuilt towers under guidance of free folk stonemasons and Dothraki eager to test skill in cold. And in a rebuilt Winterfell hall, warm with fragrant pine, Sansa hosted a feast marking years since darkness lifted. Guests from 6 kingdoms sat at trestles. Stark, Targaryen, Tyrell, Martell, Greyjoy, Arryn, sharing bread, salt, stories. Bards sang ballads of Jon Snow's silent crown, of queens forged in frost and flame. When song faded, Bran rose, surprising all, stood without aid for brief moment. He lifted goblet. His words were quiet but reached every soul. Night tried to unmake us. We answered with memory, with mercy, with trust. He looked to Sansa and Daenerys. Let no throne, no crown, weigh heavier than those. Silence profound, then cups lifted.
Gostold, Drogon roared distant, a salute.
Sansa smiled, heart swelling not with triumph, but with gentle peace distilled from countless losses. She saw in every raised cup the echo of a boy who loved snow more than glory, who taught men to choose the living over the dead. The feast's warmth spilled into corridors, out to courtyards where birch leaves fluttered red gold. Above, stars blazed bright, unblotted by storm nor fear. Outside the castle walls, fields ripe with barley rippled like bronze oceans. A single direwolf footprint pressed into soft earth, slowly filled with moonlit dew, then with green seedlings that would someday feed a pack grown strong. And southward, beyond blooming hedgerows and rivers heavy with snowmelt, the wheel of realms groaned, its spokes loosening, its rim widening to embrace dawn. The summer solstice passed in a blaze of golden daylight that lingered past the hour candles usually guttered, and the north drank every drop as though it might vanish come dawn. Wheat shafts lengthened in green waves around Winterfell, and children lost in hide-and-seek returned at dusk smelling of warm earth and crushed wild garlic. The world, so long shriveled by ice and dread, seemed suddenly too wide for walls. Yet within its expanse the tremble of unhealed fissures thrummed beneath each heartbeat, reminders that peace was still a newborn thing, soft-skulled and easily dashed against stone. Ghost felt those tremors before any watchman. On nights when the wind shifted, he left Sansa's chamber and slipped through shadowed corridors, claws ticking quiet inquiry. He paused at Bran's door, nostrils flaring to sense incalculably old, green sap and deep earth, rain before clouds form. Bran would greet him with eyelids fluttering white, hand rising in half-sleep to brush moonlit fur. Sometimes the dire wolf lingered until dawn, eyes on the horizon as if guarding more than keep or kin. Daenerys lingered at Moat Cailin after the pact, waiting for sea lanes to clear enough for her fleet to anchor near White Harbor. She housed Unsullied in moss-eaten towers, Dothraki in rolling meadows where horses stamped and whickered at northern breezes. The sight unnerved shepherds who had never seen men in braid-bound armor singing battle hymns to the setting sun. Sansa traveled thrice to the moat, each time easing frictions. She organized competitions. Spear throw against axe hurl, horse archery measured against Mormont longbow salvos. Evenings ended with shared ale and roasted venison. The barrier of tongue broke first in laughter. Tyrion kept counsel beneath a patched pavilion of Targaryen black and red. Davos joined him over casks of whiteroot whiskey. Together they mapped a kingdom no cartographer had risked since the conquest. One drawn not in borders but in flows, grain, timber, or knowledge. Tyrion scratched quill lines from Carhold's iron to Sunspear's orange groves. Davos dotted safe harbors long discounted by southern merchants. They argued soft versus hard tariffs until moon rose and parted with grudging respect for the other's stubborn mathematics. Asha set sail along new patrol routes, Kraken banners now trimmed with direwolf fringe. She harried the western sea, hunting Euron's remnants. When she found a battered longship adrift, survivors clawing decks slick with brine, she offered them passage to Bear Island, on condition they sail under Mormont Bear or perish. Some accepted, kneeling to cub-sized Lyanna like pups to Mother Bear. Others spat curses and leapt to sharks. Word of such choices spread along coasts. The North's justice came on tides now. Within Winterfell, laborers reconstructed the broken East Tower. Bran watched from a wheeled palisade, giving occasional nods that meant shift the buttress a finger's width or replace straw with moss-packed clay. Reed stonemasons followed his direction with quiet awe. Whatever voice guided him seemed older than mortar. At dusk, when workers trundled to supper, he asked Mira to wheel him into the crypts. There he traced fingers over unfinished alcoves, pausing before Jon's empty niche, a hush-filled stone corridor. He spoke to the gloom not in words but in a breath that sounded like wind across frozen lakes. Candles guttered as if exhaling with him. Footsteps interrupted. It was Sansa, cloak smelling of fresh parchment and beeswax. She kneeled beside Bran, voice hushed. "We will carve his likeness when the stonecutters learn new gods would grain," she said. "I want it truer than marble could show." Bran smiled distant. "Stone remembers shapes. The living remember warmth. Carve him, yes, but keep his name in stories at the hearth." He turned eyes shining silver. "Do you remember how he stumbled when father made him steward for a day?" He dropped the inkpot on Maester Luwin's feet. Sansa laughed, soft, startled, because she had not recollected that in years. The corridors seemed to exhale dust and grief, letting laughter echo. They stayed until torches burned low, swapping half-forgotten mischief until grief lay gentled. In King's Landing, Queen Marjorie unrolled the Northern Pact before lords restless and famished. Some cried treason. How could the Iron Throne tolerate realms breaking from centuries of fealty? Marjorie replied with crisp calm, "Better a strong ally than a resentful subject." She outlined levies lower than war's cost, trade richer than tribute, marriages weaving vine to pine. Lords who had lost sons to northern snow nodded. Grain merchants salivated at furs and pelts. Tommen, voice steadier than his years, ratified the treaty and commanded septons to bless it. The faith militant, newly leashed after Circe's end, grumbled but acquiesced. Miracles of survival at Winterfell had given even the most devout pause. Yet in black cells beneath the Red Keep, Qyburn toyed with old blue crystals culled from fallen whites smuggled by disgruntled Freys retreating south. He chilled them in alchemical brines, watched motes of frost worm across iron cages. Something old and malicious twitched within those shards, yearning for flesh. Qyburn scribbled notes of monstrous potential, his ambition unthawed by lessons of long night. Ravens he raised flew silent, dark omens that one battle never ends all wars. Moat Caelan's summit was set for high summer. Across 7, or now 6, kingdoms, invites flew. Rivers freed of ice carried boats laden with minstrels, artisans, scribes. Winterfell bustled with planning. Sansa asked Dorne to send musicians whose lutes could weave desert heat into songs. Asked Iron Islands to bring salt cod and storm drum rhythms. Asked the Vale for falconers to release doves in greeting. She tasked every house large and small to contribute something of itself. Brass lanterns from Flint clans, jars of mountain honey from Norei, carved obsidian figurines from wildling artisans. Only by tasting every heritage could the pact be sealed in hearts, not just ink. The day before departure, a rider from Skagos arrived bearing grim tidings. Miners opening new dragonglass shafts had uncovered a chamber lined with bones encased in blue crystal. When picks struck, a pulse of cold burst forth. Miners fled screaming as their breath iced solid. No whites rose, but the air itself seemed to moan like memory of massacre. Bran convened immediate council. He closed eyes, reaching roots most men never touch, then opened them with pale terror. The chamber belonged to the Night King's first lieutenants, proto-others dormant for millennia. Breaking their shell risked waking them anew. Daenerys counseled Dragonfire Purge. Tyrion suggested sealing cavern with molten stone. Reed elders argued to leave it untouched. Disturbance invited doom. Sansa weighed. Finally, she commanded Bran to weave weirwood wards around shaft mouths. Reed and children of the forest chanting old runes while Unsullied stood guard. Asha's ships blockaded coast to deter curious smugglers. The threat slept once more, but understanding dawned. Victory had been edge-thin. Depths of winter still harbored teeth. Summer's height found Moat Caelan transformed. Citadel architects strung wooden walkways high across marsh towers. Braziers burned fragrant oils keeping midges at bay. Pavilions of silks and northern wools billowed above platforms. At midday Drogon's shadow swept causeways, followed by Regal and Viserion circling high. Daenerys brought all three for ceremony but tethered them to sky with invisible leash of will, lest marsh towers char upon landing. Delegations arrived by coil. Manderley barges gliding, Martell palanquins shimmering, Vale eagles cresting banners, Tyrell carriages perfumed with rosewater. Free folk came too, skins painted green to honor marsh spirits, bearing offerings of carved mammoth ivory. The watch sent brothers black-cloaked, serious, eyes still haunted but bright with purpose regained. On a raised dais of greywood, Sansa and Daenerys greeted each arrival with clasped hands, equality made manifest. Bran sat central in Weirwood throne, children of the forest flanking like living history. Tyrion and Davos acted as heralds, reading house mottos interlaced, growing strong in winter's heart, unbowed, unbent, unbroken by frost, high as honor, old as ice. When the last banner stood, Bran's voice, quiet yet carrying through hush, spoke. The long night taught us shadows cannot stand together. They clutch and devour. Light to endure must braid. We braid today. He motioned. Children of the forest walked forward, each holding sapling grown from seeds of new godswood. They handed one to each delegation. Plant these where your hearts beat, Bran said. Let roots interlace beneath soil though crowns reach different skies. Cheers rose, mellow at first, swelling as horns and drums joined. Dothraki hooted, Tyrell musicians struck lutes. Free folk pounded high drums. Manderley horns deep as whale sighs thrummed. Asha uncorked barrels of spiced rum, sloshing cups for every comer. Broken tower walls rang with the first festival unshadowed in memory. That night, under lantern constellations, Sansa wandered walkway overlooking silvered by moon. She found Daenerys there, crimson cloak tassels trembling in humid breeze. Dragon silhouettes slept curled around distant crumbling spires, vents of smoke rising like sighs. "They look smaller at rest," Sansa murmured. "Power always does when trusted," Daenerys answered. She glanced sidelong. "Today's braid holds. Tomorrow's storms will tug." "Braids can be rewoven," Sansa said. "Tears mended with stronger thread." She turned to Dragon Queen. "Jon believed the living shared one war. He never saw this," she gestured to lights, flags, laughter. "But he bled for its dawn. We must never forget whose shadow shields us." Daenerys's eyes shimmered violet fire. "I will remember, in every flame." They stood in silence until a song drifted from distant pavilion. An old Stark ballad, now sung in Valyrian lilt, about snow kisses on summer roses. Though the pact glowed bright, some corners festered. Walder Frey balked at planting God's wood sapling. Roots might crack his bridges, he claimed. Secretly, he feared ghosts of slaughter might bloom anew in leaves. He stalled. Ravens flew north complaining of northern arrogance. Sansa responded with courtesy-laced iron. Failure to plant symbol would declare House Frey outside new Accord's protection. Merchants began diverting river traffic to salt pans where sealskin free folk offered fairer tolls. Within a month, Frey coffers rattled empty. Sons whispered coup. Walder at 96 coughed blood into porridge. When he died that autumn, his granddaughter Bethany took lordship and planted sapling on the island between towers, roots fed by river tears. Qyburn's experiments pushed deeper into frost shards. One midnight lightning storm, a raven black as pitch crashed against his window, eyes flashing sky blue. He discovered the bird dead but its core frozen. He bled it into vials, coaxing crystals to seed green wildfire. The result burned blue-white, colder than flame, capable of flash-freezing flesh. He named it Winterfire. Word leaked. Cersei's remaining loyalists flocked to hidden cellars. Grand Maester Clarice caught rumor, alerted Tommen, who commanded arrest. Qyburn fled through catacombs toward rumored Myrish contacts, clutching Winterfire files like severed dragon teeth. The game never ends, only changes board. 1 year rolled into next. Storm season floods tested causeways but held, reinforced by cranes Sansa dispatched from White Harbor shipwrights. Crops doubled last harvest. Southern traders bartered spices for furs. The Watch reported no undead beyond Stray, soulless husks emerging from melted drifts around Skago's caverns, quickly dispatched by dragonglass patrols. Childbirths surged in villages once hushed. Bells rang for weddings between free folk and clan daughters. Songs of the Night King faded into cautionary tales parents told to keep little ones near fires at dusk. Sansa walked the new Godswood, birch trunks thickening, first blood-red leaves fluttering like slow-falling embers. Bran waited, hands resting upon root armrests. He said the saplings across kingdoms thrived, their roots touched in dreams, carrying whispers of each realm, salty breezes, orchard perfume, desert heat. "We've woven living roads," he said. "Even if castles fall, hearts will know the path." Sansa knelt, pressed palm to moss. She closed eyes, breathed. In hush she heard faint echoes. Laughter of Dothraki children chasing goats near King's Landing. Splash of Riverlander fisher who hummed northern tune. Rustle of Dornish palm bending in midnight breeze. She felt pack whiter than blood. When she rose, tears streaked cheeks bright as dawn, but she smiled. Later that eve, she stood atop Winterfell's highest parapet, cloak snapping beneath stars. Ghost at her side, she surveyed land quilted in silver moonlight. Fires dotted far holds, signals not of war but of hearths alive. She turned slowly, gaze lingering north. Beyond Black Ridge lay the wall. Still tall, still scarred, but shining now with mirrored ice of sunrise, as though reflecting not cold but promise. She spoke soft, words whisked by wind yet etched upon night. "You kept your watch, Jon. Now I keep mine." Below, life thrummed. Smith hammers, infant cries, lovers' whispers, dragons' distant wing beat. Above, constellations wheeled ancient circles, indifferent yet illuminating. Between, a young queen of winter and spring stood rooted, leaf and flame, daughter, sister, sovereign, guide. Seasons would bend, wheels would turn, but the pack, wolf, dragon, kraken, rose, spear, falcon, remained. And so the north, once frozen under weight of endless night, leaned into sun's long arc, carrying in its marrow the echo of a boy who knew nothing yet taught everything. That courage stands tallest when born of love, and that even in deepest snow, seeds of summer wait patient, dreaming of light. Smoke still curled from the last torch when dawn settled lightly over Moat Cailin, a hush so sudden it seemed woven by the spirits of the fawn themselves. The towers, half-ruined and newly ribbon-bright with pennons from every realm, cast long shadows across waters glassed by the hush. Sansa stood upon a rickety parapet of green-black stone, the damp seeping up through her boots, and watched jet-winged swallows flick between flags. Their wings etched patterns across first light, ink on sky, fleeting yet certain, as if even the smallest heart understood the magnitude of what had been done the night before. And yet an uneasiness tugged at the stitches of her mind, a whisper that peace, even one sealed by roots and dragonflight, might be torn by hands too clever or too desperate to abide calm. She heard quiet footsteps and turned to find Davos Seaworth picking his way across slick stones. He carried no cloak, though the air still tasted the edge of marsh chill, only Longclaw's scabbard at hip, a habit he never abandoned when shadows lengthened. The old knight stopped beside her, following her gaze to the distant silhouettes of Daenerys's dragons now circling wide, dark crescents against a pale sky. "Does a dragon ever grow weary of the wind?" he asked softly. "Perhaps," Sansa murmured. "But if it lands too long its wings forget how to rise." Davos's chuckle was half-breath. "Then let's hope our folk don't grow too fond of ground beneath them." His eye, the one not clouded by salt and years, sharpened. Tyrion sends word the Dornish envoy found a cask of wildfire in an abandoned cellar under the South Tower, sealed since Aerys' day by the markings. A reminder from the past, then. She felt her shoulders tense. Have it moved to the swamp sink. Let the marsh swallow it. All of it. "Aye, my queen." He shifted, voice lower. "I want an escort of Unsullied to ferry the cask." Dothraki hands itch for new stories. Wildfire is no myth to toy with. "Make it so," Sansa said, but her gaze stayed on the sky where Drogon banked, banking again. His wingtip dipped as though troubled by currents she could not see, and with each slow beat of those vast wings, she recalled Bran's warning of fishers still sleepless beneath northern ice and southern ambition. By midday the pavilions woke to clamor. Cooks bellowing over cauldrons, Dothraki horse lords, riding impromptu races along causeways, reed children weaving cattail crowns for Unsullied who stood stiff but allowed the decoration. Yet under the merry din, 3 intrigues crept. In one tent draped Tyrell green, Lord Mathos Rowan of Goldengrove met in whispers with a man clad in Night's Watch black. Not a brother, for the wool was dyed new and the cloak still smelled of Lannisport dye vats. The impostor drew forth a scroll, edges charred, bearing the sigil of a lion split by twin arrows. He spoke of Casterly gold still keen on northern, or of a queen in King's Landing who smiled sweet but measured power in ledgers. Rowan listened, lips thin, palms hidden beneath table where a ring etched with hidden rose thorns pricked blood in steady rhythm. In Daenerys's command tower, Tyrion Lannister argued with Grey Worm over distribution of obsidian spear tips. Grey Worm desired full allotment for Unsullied phalanxes guarding dragon eggs newly laid on Dragonstone. Tyrion pressed for equal trade to Dornish scouts patrolling Slavers' Bay trade routes. The exchange, sharp but civil, ended with Tyrion promising a revised inventory by sundown and Grey Worm staring after him with still eyes. When Grey Worm turned, he caught movement. Varys, cloaked though heat climbed, entering a side chamber where whispers coiled like incense. The Spider had returned from the east with news of Sellsword companies still loyal to Free City coin. companies who might see northern stability as a threat to mercenary profit. Across Marsh Road, Peter Baelish's remaining agents, men who had survived his fall by shedding names and bending knee to any who paid, met in a makeshift tavern. They drank brackish ale and spoke of Winterfire rumor, of Qyburn seeking patrons for weapons potent enough to chill bone to dust. One agent, a woman with freckles on throat shaped like speckled eggs, slipped out after nightfall, bound north. She carried a hollow ring filled with powder the hue of dusk frost. Its price: the promise of a seat at any table where chaos might yet bloom. That night, beneath a sky bruised with violet and spangled by bright constellations, Sansa joined Daenerys for a private meal atop a watchtower whose stones sweated marsh vapor. A small table stood between them, bearing hair stew thickened with thyme and onions, flatbread studded with salt crystals, and 2 cups of Golden Arbor wine cooled in peat. Ghost reclined at Sansa's side. Drogon's distant silhouette lay curled around a crumbling tower beyond water lilies. For a while they spoke of simpler matters, of the taste difference between northern lingonberry tarts and Dornish orange custard, of the way Unsullied had learned to mend fisher nets, of how Crannog boats slid across pools at dawn with hardly a ripple. Then Daenerys leaned forward, candle flame dancing in her eyes. "You sense something unsettled," she said. Sansa met her gaze. "Peace breeds fear in those who traded in war. Already emissaries of old houses test boundaries." Daenerys tilted her head. "Name them." "Rowan of Golden Grove meets with false crows. The Vale still holds lords whispering for silver tongues lost. And further south." Sansa allowed a sigh. "I do not see Tommen plotting treachery, yet Qyburn remains at large, and Wildfire is not the only pyre he tends." Daenerys's fingers traced rim of her cup. "I know men like him. In Meereen they poisoned wells, blaming beasts. In Karth they would have stolen dragon eggs. Their cruelty is coined to them." She paused. "My dragons could scour him from his hole." "They could," Sansa allowed, voice gentle. "Yet each flame invites shadow to step forward. If we venture south with dragons now, old fears reignite. Let us instead weave networks of trust stronger than Qyburn's secrets." Daenerys's mouth curved, half-smile. "You would fight poison with root and vine. I would fight darkness with memory and vigilance," Sansa countered. "And, if needed, with blade." She touched Longclaw's pommel at her waist, returned to stark hands by Davos after it served him through winter's night. "We defend by ensuring none stand alone again." Daenerys raised cup. "To no throne alone." They drank. Atop distant tower Drogon raised his head to moon, a silent toast of scaled king. 3 days later Bran summoned council to the Heart Tower, newly reinforced with reed-thatched roof. His summons came in raven feathers scattered at each delegate's doorstep. They gathered at dusk. Sansa, Daenerys, Tyrion, Davos, Grey Worm, Lyanna Mormont, Jon Royce, and Lord Rowan. Daemon Sand representing Dorne, Wyllis Manderly, Hother Reed. Bran's throne of twisted heartwood roots glowed faint, sap dripping honey scent beneath torchlight. "I dreamed the rivers ran dry with frost in summer's heart," Bran began, voice echoing through chamber. "I saw a storm of glass sharper than night. Winterfire. Qyburn has perfected it. He courts backers among Sellsword companies who lost coin when peace came." Murmurs flared. Tyrion cursed softly. Rowan's fingers drummed. Grey Worm's jaw tightened. Bran continued. His plan: barrels of Winterfire hidden along grain routes from Old Town to King's Landing. One spark and harvest rots under ice. Famine births revolt. Realms fracture. He sells remedy to highest bidder. Sansa felt chill deeper than marsh fog. "How soon?" "Caravans leave from Storm's End within a fortnight," Bran said. "Sells words disguised as trading guild." Daenerys rose. "We intercept. Dragons can melt caravans to slag." Rowan stepped forward. "Queen's dragons near Storm's End will stir panic. Better send riders who know those lands. Golden Grove, Tarth, Evenfall." Sansa studied him. "You volunteer?" Rowan inclined head. "Golden Grove has wheat at stake, and I owe for..." past silence. He avoided her eye. Tyrion interjected. Rowan's knowledge of reach roads is strong, but caravans may split. We need a multi-pronged interception. Grey Worm. Unsullied detachments can ride hidden behind farm wagons, strike on signal. Davos. And my smuggler's knowledge of Blackwater tributaries can block river escape. Daenerys Wade. Good. I will keep dragons north, but send Regal with a small flight west of Storm's End. Shadows cowards hide in will melt before green flame. Sansa nodded. Then leave tonight. Bran will mark caravans in visions. Trust his ravens. Rowan darted glance at Bran, whose eyes shimmered pale. Alliance sealed, council dispersed. Night after council, Tyrion wandered encampment scented of mint and horse sweat. He found Varys outside a tent awash in purple lamplight, humming tune of Volantis whorehouses. Tyrion fell in step. You've been quiet. I listen. The spider's smile was faint. And I heard you volunteer unsullied to a Reach Roads ambush. They're soldiers. They crave discipline. They crave purpose, Varys corrected. Ask every freedman. Purpose feeds more than bread. Tyrion halted by torch. You worry loyalty may wane? I worry if we forget their humanity. Someone else will remember for us and twist it. Varys sighed. Wars of steel are simple. Wars of hearts, slipperier. Then help me win hearts, Tyrion said. I could use a whisper holding Winterfire's fuse. Varys inclined head. I already dispatched songbirds to Storm's End taverns. Qyburn's men drink. Songs will turn to confessions. They parted. 2 weeks later word arrived by Hawk. Rowan's riders ambushed 1st Winterfire convoy on King's Road Bend near Griffin's Roost. Barrels shattered in clash. Frost burst, flash freezing 5 cells words mid-scream. Rowan himself lost 2 fingers to shrapnel, but Grey Worm's unsullied cut the rest down. Davos's river blockade caught 2nd convoy. Smugglers surrendered quick when arrows of dragonglass split their keels and river water boiled from hidden cauldrons of Regal's flame overhead. But 3rd convoy never left Storm's End. Instead, Castle Garrison discovered cellars blown, Lord Ser Edmund Baratheon slain by ice shards, sigil banner frozen mid-flap. Qyburn had been there, but slipped away through secret tunnels leading to shore, leaving only crest imprint of silver hand on frost. A mark of clandestine Lannister loyalists once sworn to Jaime. He had Winterfire recipe still. Sansa received news at Winterfell's war table. Her fist clenched parchment edges. We severed Serpent's body. Head still strikes. Daenerys, visiting, paced hearth. We hunt him. Dragons over Blackwater Bay. Unsullied in sewers. No, Bran's voice cut sharp. Qyburn seeks draw of dragonfire to ignite remaining Winterfire caches hidden in King's Landing cellars. If Drogon roars above, sparks will rain across city. Silence swallowed Hall. Sansa saw again devastation of Cersei's wildfire. The red keeps sundered in green hell. She could not allow Blue Frost Twin to repeat. She looked to Davos. Smugglers no red keep catacombs. He said slowly, I can steer a keel up the Blackwater under moon, slip through secret storm drains, need a small team, and luck measured by the gods' most generous scales. Take me, Tyrion said, voice flat. I built half those drains. I also know Qyburn's humors. He'll relish gloating. Grey Worm stepped forward. I will guard you. Davos raised brow. Unsullied commander in sewer? Yet he nodded. Sansa met Daenerys's gaze. Hold dragons north of Rose Road. If we fail, we won't, Daenerys said, but her hand trembled at thought. She touched Sansa's wrist. Jon's dream lives in our restraint. A waning moon hid behind ragged clouds when Davos's black-hulled skiff slipped across Blackwater. Tyrion crouched in prow, cloak damp. Grey Worm, silent, rode with strokes smooth as a heron's wings. Behind them 5 unsullied each bore obsidian-bladed spears, tips wrapped in oil-soaked cloth that smoldered faint to ward rats. The skiff slid under rotted pier, into maw of drain carved by Aegon's masons. They advanced through slurry, ankle-deep. Tyrion guided with whispers. Left at torch niche, right where slime turned emerald. Above, faint thunder of city restless. Grey Worm paused, sensing vibration through brick. Explosive storage. His eyes traced cracks. Frost glimmered on mortar. They reached Iron Gate half-collapsed. Beyond lay Catacomb Vault aglow with eerie blue-white. Winterfire casks radiated hoarfrost, air so cold it burned lungs. Atop crate stack, Qyburn stood in fur-lined robe, chalking sigils on cask lids, muttering. Tyrion stepped out. Your handwriting's improved. Qyburn stiffened, turned, eyes gleaming. Ah, Lord Hand, I wondered when curiosity would kill you. Tyrion advanced, palms up. Curiosity? No. Hunger. This city starves for a good show, But blue fireworks? Too chilling. Qyburn smiled, sinister. He clicked fingers. From shadows 6 tall men lumbered. Clegane-sized brutes sewn of corpse parts and frost. Winterfire surging below patchwork skin. Eyes blue flames. Grey Worm signaled. Unsullied rushed, spears igniting. Battle narrow corridor of ice and flame. Grey Worm parried monstrous fists shattering stone. Obsidian spears pierced constructs. Winterfire hissed, freezing shafts to brittle shards. One brute seized unsullied by head, crushed skull to powder frost. Davos hurled lamp oil. Tyrion flung torch. Flames seared cold flesh. Creature shrieked soundless. Qyburn retreated deeper, grabbed cord leading to clay pot atop casks. Grey Worm saw, hurled spear. Tip clipped Qyburn's shoulder, spun him. He yanked cord regardless. Pot crashed, releasing shower of sparks. Alchemical match hotter than forge. Tyrion leapt, tackling Grey Worm behind slab as flame met Winterfire. For an instant, the vault glowed star-bright, a fusion of blue and orange spirals. Then world shook. Shockwave punched drains, hurled skiff parked beyond. River boiled. When roar faded, vault was void. Winterfire extinguished by its own sudden burn, leaving glassy walls. At center lay Qyburn, half encased in ice, alive only in eyes darting hate. Grey Worm advanced, blade drawn. Tyrion touched his arm. Let the realm witness. They bound Qyburn in chains chilled by residual frost. Escape proved perilous. Tunnels flooded with steaming water. Davos guided survivors through secondary sluice. Dawn painted city towers red as they emerged, dripping onto fogged riverbank. Queen Marjorie received prisoners at Throne Hall still ringed by scaffolds. Qyburn, frozen shackles melting, offered snarled prophecy of winter's return. Tommen, pale, ordered him thrown into cells until trial of realm delegates. Sansa and Daenerys rode south upon Raven message, Bran sending Reed escorts. At conclave convened in Great September's ruins, a symbol of cleansing, they tried Qyburn. Evidence displayed: Winterfire casks, corpses of frost golems, scroll diaries of cruelty. He defended with brilliance. I sought a weapon to keep dragons at bay, but living had seen enough fire and ice. Verdict unanimous. Death. Sentence unusual. He would drink his own concoction diluted in summer wine. Frost within fire to end heart. He accepted with fascination, scribbling final notes. As he sipped, veins glazed blue, breath crystallized in air. He whispered, so cold, so beautiful, and shattered into diamond slivers upon marble. The shards were swept into lead casks sealed by 3 sigils: wolf, dragon, rose, and sunk at sea depths where currents slept. In aftermath, Sansa stood on Red Keep's breezy rampart beside Daenerys. Below, city thrummed calmer. Markets reopened under banners mixing stag, rose, direwolf, dragon. Ships from White Harbor offloaded timber for orphanage rebuilds. Daenerys breathed salt air. You saved this city without Dragonfire. Jon saved us, Sansa replied. His ghost lingers in every choice we make against flame for the living. Daenerys smiled. Then let's honor him further. She extended parchment. Decree naming Jon Snow Day each winter solstice. Feasts for poor hosted across realms. Sansa's eyes warmed. She signed. Years unwound like quiet scroll. Children born at Moat Kalen Moot grew into youths learning Dothraki horsemanship and stark archery. Dragons nested on Dragonstone cliffs, hunted only whales far offshore. The wall became monument peacekeeping outpost, open to traders exchanging northern pelts for John fruit from Slaver's Bay. The new godswood across kingdoms interlaced, roots deep. Those who slept near heard faint pulse of other lands, a reminder of shared breath. Sansa aged, lines of laughter and midnight worry about economy across face, but kept red hair braided with birch ribbon. She ruled Winterfell and Northern Federation by counsel, rarely raising voice yet always heard. Each year she journeyed to Storm's End to plant a sapling with children of houses once distant. Each year the moats between hearts dried further. Daenerys became protector of realms, not conqueror. Her iron throne melted into plowshares, replaced by Council Dais where Tommen, Marjorie, Dorne's Prince Kyle, Tyrion, and others deliberated. She sat seldom, preferring to fly with Drogon along coastlines, reminding fisher fleets she watched storms above them, not lords. Bran, bound to Weirwood, faded and brightened cyclically, mind spanning centuries. When he finally slipped into roots fully, spring blossoms burst red across every sapling planted at the pact. Folk whispered he had become the tree. On the 20th anniversary of Night's Fall, a festival spanned realms. In Winterfell's godswood under leaves of scarlet and birch silver, elders recounted how once a bastard died so that kingdoms might learn to live. They spoke not of swords and wildfire alone, but of hands extended across divides, of songs braided, of dragons held in restraint, of queens who learned counsel. Ghost, muzzle grizzled, sat among children during story. When last torch dimmed he raised muzzle, howled low, soft, contented. Somewhere far south a dragon roared aquiline answer, not of warning but greeting. Echoes crossed air warm and fragrant, and none who heard feared. Sansa lay that night in Solar overlooking fields golden with barley. She dreamed of Winterfell in first winter, of her brother's sword sparring, of Jon's laugh and shy gaze, of snowflakes turning to flower petals. She woke before dawn, tears on cheeks, and whispered, "Thank you." Outside, first light revealed every sapling across courtyard crowned in white blossoms edged red. Spring's vow to remember winter yet not be bound by it. Farmers would later marvel, say it was luck. Sansa sensed deeper, pack heartbeat across soil. She dressed, clasped a plain jet brooch carved as direwolf. She walked walls barefoot, feeling rough stone warm under sunrise. She breathed scents of hearth smoke, honey cakes, leather curing. In distance she saw travelers approaching. Free folk traders, Dornish spice wagons, Braavosi playwright troupe invited for midsummer pageant. Doors of Winterfell would open wide. Sansa smiled, the crisp of Northlands and promise of sun mingling in breath. The clouds parted. A shaft of gold painted the courtyard where, long ago, cold blood had pooled. Now wildflowers pushed through cracks, nodding in breeze. She descended to greet new day, heart steady, wings unseen unfurled within, wings of pack and dream and promise, strong enough to carry kingdoms should storms return, light enough to soar above suspicion. Her story, Jon's story, the North story, woven now to realms beyond counting, would last, she knew, as long as roots drew water and children dreamed beneath red and white leaves. And that, in any season, was enough. A hiss of wind folded through the high slit windows of Winterfell Solar, stirring the vellum maps that lay fanned beneath quartz glow lanterns. Sansa paused mid-stride, head cocked, attuned to the language of that draft. Not a storm, she knew those voices well, but a harbinger of change, as if distant glaciers had exhaled a secret into the night. She tugged a wolf fur mantle close and resumed pacing a line worn smooth in oak boards, the rhythm of her thoughts mirrored in the quiet patter of ghosts' claws as the old direwolf tracked her shadow. Below, the keep slumbered. So did the valley. Mormont longboats moored under the white knife, Dornish caravans shuttered outside the east gate, smithy fires banked to warm steel without waste. But in her marrow a pulse quickened, tugging memory of Bran's last words before roots claimed him fully. Watch the tides that rise without moon or wind. They carry dreams older than dragons. She had believed it a riddle about ambition, until Tyrion's raven arrived at dusk. Ink still damp, 3 terse lines. Old Town Harbor empties. Bravo's convoys west under Black Goat hire. Reach spies speak of a new color to Winterfire. No threat named, but the pattern stark. Ships fleeing, mercenaries marching, arcane weapons mutating in clandestine hands. And somewhere in that dark weave, fragments of Jon's legacy. Unity, trust, strained as if the knots that bound realm and realm had begun to fray. A soft rap on timber. Davos slipped inside, gray in beard and gaze. Word from the neck, he murmured. Crannig scouts caught a Free City corsair mapping reed channels. Says he was hired to chart a path no lantern can follow. On him, a vial. He offered a cloth-wrapped bundle. Sansa unfolded it. Within shimmered a sliver of crystal, pale violet shot through with threads of midnight. It sucked warmth from her palm. The artificers think it an evolution beyond Winterfire, Davos said. Colder, hungrier. She drew her hand away, skin numb. Who forges ice keener than winter's own? No firm sign, but the corsair spoke of rag-robed priests chanting of the last dawn. Drank themselves blind on shade of the evening. Davos's jaw tensed. That cult flowered once. In Karth. It died under dragon breath. Yet root remains if a careless gardener leaves soil unturned. Sansa turned to Ghost. The dire wolf stared at the shard, ears flat, low rumble vibrating his ribcage. Then we must pull root and poison alike. She unrolled a fresh parchment, penned orders. Reed outriders fortify causeway forts. Manderley galleys sweep bays for black-hulled triremes. Ravens to Daenerys at Dragonstone bearing sample for her alchemists. Summons to council at the moat within 10 nights. Davos sealed scrolls. I'll sail tide first light. As door closed, Sansa pressed numb palm to heart. Vowed Bran's root may slumber, but her vigilance would not. With dawn the north stirred to motion long rehearsed yet never casual. Smithies rang anew, forging twin sets of weapons. Dragonglass bright as night ice, and steel quenched in birch resin. Lighter, faster for marsh skirmish. Maesters brewed crimson dyes and painted rune-sigiled banners ready to raise if beacons lit. Blacksmith Ellie Marsh bound silver thread along new arrow fletches, gleamed to trap sorcerers' eyes in moonlight. Sansa walked workshops, listening to hum of purpose. Each clang hammered fear into resolve. 2 leagues south of Barrowton, where rolling grass concealed remnants of trench lines from the Bolton revolt, Lyanna Mormont drilled shield maidens and fisher lads in paired phalanx skirmish formations. Her voice cracked like wet pine in fire. Hold line, strike flank, sing loud so God's here. At midday break she wrote Sansa, if cultists crawl through my reed beds, they'll find bear claws sharp as ever. Atop Bear Island cliffs, Asha Greyjoy watched squalls bruise horizon. Her raiders refitted longships with shallow draft keels, perfect for pursuing corsairs into creek mazes. She found satisfaction in this north that no longer labeled her people pillagers but sentinels of tide. Yet she brooded on rumor. Blocks of Sellswords under Braavosi coin lords hiring ironborn turncoats exiled years earlier. Men who recalled every inlet between Pike and Skagos. Coin might seduce them home. Daenerys received the shard at Dragonstone's painted table. Regal snarled when alchemists set it beneath dragonfire lens. The stone bled vapor that frosted lens crystal. The queen's brow furrowed. It drinks heat. Missandei, now senior scholar, studied runes etched within the crystal like frozen lightning. These markings predate even Asshai glyphs. A script of the shadow binding cold and chaos. Daenerys felt Drogon circle sky above as if smelling new peril. She penned answer for Sansa, we ride now. Let North Marsh hear dragons once more before shadow falls. She sailed with 300 unsullied, 50 Dothraki screamers bound by honor to Northern Queen, and both surviving dragons. Across wave-white sea their sails gleamed obsidian black and stark white, braided just as roots were braided. Meanwhile, in the cellars of Old Town Citadel, Archmesters gathered around a mirror-still obsidian table where Qyburn's notes seized months earlier lay in neat stacks. Archmaester Clarice, once Tommen's advisor, traced the Winterfire formulas with tongs, voice hushed. He wrote of a catalyst sigil, an anchor required to stabilize new ice flame. Another maester, Schaefer, master of Valyrian lore, hurried through scrolls illustrating a crown cut from starlight, center hollow as eye. He lacked anchor, Clarice deduced, meaning he sought a vessel. Their gaze lifted to each other. A soul, Schaefer whispered, or a body touched by both fire and ice. The room chilled despite summer. They thought of Jon returned through sorcery, of Daenerys thrice born through flame, of Bran half-root, half-seer. Clarice sealed scrolls and dispatched fast riders. Warnings to Moat Cailin and King's Landing. At Moat Cailin, council reconvened weeks later. Rain traced rivulets on canvas pavilions. Sansa, Daenerys, Tyrion, Davos, Lyanna, Asha, Jon Royce, Dornish envoy Lady Nymeria Kyle, Archmaester Clarice, and the new warden of the Free Folk, Tormund, beard shot with silver, circled Bran's empty heartwood throne. A hush heavier for his absence. Clarice spread maps. Braavosi contract fleets converge on 3 points: Skagos Strait, Shield Islands, Whispering Sound. Caravans of Nightglass, this new crystal, move over land to join them. Tyrion, eyes sharp behind horn-rimmed spectacles. Blockade at sea, interdiction by land. But we need to sever anchor. What binds Nightglass to its storm? Daenerys produced shard. Its hunger for heat suggests counter. Union of fire and fire. She met Sansa's eye. Dragons. But Archmaester shook head. Burning the cargo may freeze entire fleets. You must nullify sigil first. Shatter glyph with pulse older than its forge. Davos. Bran once stirred such pulse through Weirwood network. Without him, silence. Ghost whined low. Then Lyanna rose, fist on hip. Roots run still. We may not be greenseers, but we hold blades carved of those roots. She unsheathed a short sword whose guard bore living birch crest. If glyph speaks to cold, we answer with sap still beating. Sansa's thoughts raced. We pair fire and root. Dragon strafe, while strike teams board Braavosi flagships carrying living heartwood stakes. Impale crates before flame. Asha's grin spread. I know how to board a ship, Dornish Lady Nymeria, and how to tip a cask into the sea while it's still alive and kicking. Daenerys nodded. Prepare fleets. At dawn we sail. King's Landing, hearing of fleets massing, moved to edge. Queen Marjorie fortified Blackwater chain. Tommen drilled city garrison. The faith militant marched processions praying for mercy. Qyburn's execution had not ended hunger for weapons. Rumors of Cersei sympathizers offering bounties on dragon eggs surfaced. Grand September now rubble, but zeal still smoldered. Sea of sighs, off whispering sound. Dawn painted water copper. Asha's spearhead fleet of 9 longships, hulls black with pine tar, cut through calm toward silhouette of Braavosi Leviathan, Velvet Star. On quarterdeck, robed cultists chanted guttural hymns. Crates strapped in netting glistened violet beneath canvas. Archers, notch, Asha hissed. Arrows wrapped in linen soaked with dragon blood resin ignited from braziers. Whistles sliced dawn hush. Arrows fell among chanting priests. Blue sparks erupted where they struck night glass. Crates shuddered. Frost crackled across deck. From cloud-veiled east, dragons arrived. Drogon's roar shattered sky. Regal dove behind, emerald wings slicing wind. Fire jetted, not orange fury but measured beams. Superheated gouts trained by Daenerys' will. Flames met frost vapor, swirling tempest but held. Ironborn grappling hooks clanged against hull. Asha vaulted rail, twin axes carving cultists. Behind her, Lyanna led Mormont shield maidens across plank. They bore heartwood stakes wrapped in weirwood leaves. Below deck, ice fog coiled. Asha hacked crates lashings. Lyanna drove stake through glyph rune. Wood hissed, sap sizzled cobalt, glyph dimmed. Deck planks buckled. Frost withdrew. Above, Drogon released final torrent. Flame tumbled into hold, but now crystal lacked anchor. Night glass shattered in cascade of violet shards dissolving midair, heat swallowing cold. Yet chaos remained. Cultists ignited incendiaries. Sails caught blue flame. Asha bellowed retreat. Mormonts leapt to longship seconds before Velvet Star exploded in blossom of sapphire ice dust that flash-boiled sea. Shockwave pitched longships. Water geysers rained brine and shattered ice. But Drogon's massive wing shielded survivors from worst. When mist cleared, Braavosi ship location was boiling whirlpool, violet flecks melting into dawn. Across seas similar battles raged. Davos with Manderley galleys rammed night-glass barges near Shield Islands. Clarissa's scholars atop deck chanting countersigils while Unsullied drove Heartwood through crates. Regal strafed from above. In Skagos Strait, free folk archers lured corsairs into kelp shoals where Crannig frog spearmen breached hulls from beneath, Heartwood spikes strapped to harpoons. By sundown, nightglass convoys lay wreckage scattered along coasts. Surviving mercenary captains scuttled ships rather than face dragons. Cult priests who surrendered babbled of the last dawn, a prophecy of perpetual twilight flown on wings of cold. Their manuscripts burned swiftly under torch. Yet one ledger recovered, a payment schedule from Bank of Bravos, a down payment to cult in gemstone weight, signed only with sigil of goat skull and raven. Tyrion studied. Handwriting belonged to coin lord Mor-Ito-san, known agitator against crown alliances. The ledger projected second phase. Infiltration of Westerosi noble houses through untraceable gifts of nightglass jewelry. Tyrion scowled. We smote fleet. The serpent's tail wiggles further inland. Daenerys clenched fist. We end Banks play. Bravos respects coin. We bankrupt this cult. Sansa thought deeper. But influence seeps into cracks of grief. We must flood cracks with light. Open trade. Open courts. Open hearts. Asha barked laugh. And keep axes sharp. After salvage, survivors convened at Storm's End. Rain lashed garrison walls. Sansa addressed assembly in inner hall lit by braziers reflecting off her wolf-sigilled breastplate. We cut Winterfire root, she began. Yet new seeds scatter. We cannot guard every field alone. So we weave again. She unveiled measures. Realm-wide network of watchwards. Lighthouses where dragonglass beacons burned nightly, visible trails across coasts. Traveling moot circuits where each season delegates host open hall in different kingdom, ensuring grievances heard before poison sets. City alchemists supervised by Maester Unsullied pairs. Archives of arcane lore open to all rather than hoarded for cabal. Daenerys-backed decree. Marjorie's emissary pledged crown funds. Dorne offered desert glass for beacon lenses. Ironborn contributed black obsidian dredged near pike trenches. Even Lady Bethany Fry, eager to reclaim honor, donated river reed parchment for open ledgers. Thus Lighthouse Accord born. Years flowed. Flamefrost cult dwindled. Braavosi Bank purged Mor-Ito. Winterfire shards displayed in Citadel Museum as warning. The beacons, over 70 by 5th year, lit coasts each dusk. Red gold flames refracting through obsidian to shimmer green at apex. A spectral chorus echoing root and fire. Sailors navigating midnight seas felt comfort seeing those spectral towers. They called them Snow's lanterns. Traveling moots became festivals. Markets blossomed. Minstrels forged songs mixing Dornish drums with Wintertown fiddles. Children recited legend of Bear Queen Lyanna, Dragon Rider Daenerys, Queen Wolf Sansa, Winged Smuggler Davos, Giant Friend Tormund. In Bravos, playwright Pen the Pack remembers, a drama mixing tragedy and farce. Sansa chuckled reading script, but allowed touring troop into Winterfell anyway. Ghost, his muzzle white with final snows, eventually lay beneath weirwood leaves and did not rise at dawn. Sansa buried him near Jon's empty statue, carving on stone, first of the new dawn pack. That night wolves across Wolfswood howled. Dragons across sea answered in chord low and mournful yet proud. She aged, hair silver at temples now. Still she walked walls barefoot dawn after dawn, feeling warmth of flagstones from hearths below. From parapet she saw fields ripe with barley, saw new watchtower west where once Bolton flayed. She traced tapestry of seasons. They no longer feared first snowfall but welcomed it as signal to gather, share flame, recount memory. In her 70th winter, grandmother's moot convened at Winterfell. She sat in Godswood, birch now thick as a youth's thigh, leaves half-white in frost. Children presented a wooden puzzle cube etched with map of realms, their learning game. She asked them to solve. They slipped pieces, laughing when edges matched. She realized Bran's roots had taught them network of belonging. As moon climbed, she walked crypt one last time, placed white blossom upon Jon's niche. She felt not sorrow but fullness. She ascended parapet, stars wheeling. In distance torch beacons sparked across horizon, snow's lanterns guiding unknown sailors. A hush settled, same hush she felt decades earlier, but now rich with promise kept. She spoke into wind. The tide rose without moon, but we learned its song. She closed eyes, felt wing beats of dragon across memory, howl of wolves, roar of hearths. When she opened them, dawn's first blush kissed horizon again. She inhaled, tasted barley, pine, salt, mere, desert wind, tapestry breath. And she knew even should darkness attempt rise once more, it would meet a realm rooted in unity, braided in light, shielded by memory. Because a bastard sacrifice had shown them that fences of fear crumble, but bridges of trust endure like roots beneath snow. The wind carried her words far beyond parapet, across hills and seas, to be repeated in inns and keeps, until they settled into lore. That the north, the realm, and every child who dreamed beneath birchweirwood leaves would remember always the night they stood together and chose dawn. And dawn, thereafter, never failed to answer. Snowmelt drummed a slow dirge against the hawthorn thicket edging Winterfell's south orchard, each clear bead sliding beneath clustered blossoms before vanishing into moss. The scent, half bitter sap, half honey-sweet promise, swirled on a wind that carried hints of the distant western sea. Near the weirwood birch at the Godswood's heart, Lady Arianne Vallean Stark, named for wives of both desert and ice, bent to tuck a fallen branch, twigs soft with first buds, into the hollow of a sap-stained brazier. Her fingers left flecks of fragrant resin on the bronze lip as she straightened, skirts of midnight blue shimmering with tiny embroidered wolves. She breathed in, slow, steady, listening for the rhythm beneath the hush. Water trickling, sap rising, roots whispering, the ordinary symphony that had become a political gauge for her mother, Queen Sansa Stark, these last years. PGSQL. The brazier spat once, a fragrant puff, but did not ignite. Arianne frowned. A second later, she felt her mother's presence behind her. Sensed Ghost's progeny, Snow Shadow, slink to flank. Sansa's voice, husky now with age, floated soft. If the twig's wet, it requires patience or tinder. Arianne smiled. But if I wait too long, the offering's lost in smoke. The offering is thought, Sansa returned, kneeling beside the brazier. Fire only carries it. She cradled a small rag, torn from linen once used to polish Longclaw, and set it under the branch. She whispered a word that Arianne could not quite hear because suddenly the air trembled with a low, resonant hum. Somewhere far overhead, a dragon's wings beat. Both women turned their eyes skyward. Dappled sunlight flickered through birch leaves fluttering red gold. Above them, the great black silhouette of Drogon's fifth hatchling, Maidenstorm, circled once, banked and glided northward, trailing a long ribbon of cloud-sheared mist. The hum tapered, silence closed. Arianne exhaled, half awe, half concern. I'd thought dragons returned to Dragonstone this season. They do, Sansa answered, standing. Unless they sense imbalance in root or flame. She met her daughter's gaze. Hazel flecked with amber, like her father, a Dornish scholar who had sailed to Winterfell as a young emissary of the Lighthouse Accord and never quite sailed away. Arianne read the intent there. Duty stirs again. A servant huffed into view at the Godswood's archway, breathless. A scroll bearing Daenerys's personal seal, dragon wings flaring over birch leaf. Sansa accepted it with quiet nod, and while the servant bowed away, unrolled parchment. Words ran swift as raptor tracks. Asterisk Bravo's council in turmoil. Unborn dragons sought. Shade-skinned assassins wearing goat skulls breach Stepstone's forts. Nightglass in motion again. Meet at Heart Beacon within fortnight. Bring Heartwood stakes, Maester Clarissa's runes, Longclaw's bearer. Asterisk, she paused at final line. Added in Tyrion's small flourish. Winterward tremor sensed by Weirwood. Here calmer, more croon at dusk. Some door wakes. Sansa lowered scroll. It seems peace asks us for another vigil. Calmer Moor lay 300 leagues northwest of Carhold, a plateau where ravens rarely flew and the muted moan of centuries-old winds shaped granite spires like Titan's teeth. The Weirwood network called it a hinge, Bran once said, a place where songlines of the first trees braided and unbraided their memories. Few visited, every root there inhaled stories dormant since before fire fell to man. Arianne traveled there at Sansa's behest with a small retinue. Ser Jane Umber, broad-backed and red-haired, Maester Clarissa's apprentice, Tamsin Storm, and Snowshadow trotting silent guard. They rode swift palfreys across wild grasses that whispered of earlier wars and down into valleys smelling of peat and yellow flowers. The journey seemed uneventful, save at dusk of their second night when a half-moon swam in salmon-pink clouds and the air tugged at the torches as if breathing. They made camp near a tarn whose glassy surface reflected constellations before the stars emerged. Ser Jane sang low an Umber marching tune, sharpening her sword. Tamsin scribbled runes on birch bark, murmuring formula that kept glow beetles snared to cage. Arianne paced, restless, until her boots met loamy earth at Tarn's edge. The water trembled, not ripple of wind, but concentric rings from center though no pebble fell. She crouched, fish nowhere stirring. Then faint hum surfaced, akin to distant dragon wing yet deeper, subterranean. Snowshadow padded to her side, hackles bristling, eyes luminous. The hum subsided. Arianne touched surface. Chill shot up her arm in sudden jolt as if invisible blade of ice parted flesh. She hissed, withdrew. A droplet clung to fingertips sparkling violet. Night glass in liquid form? She called the May Sterling. They captured sample in vial sealed with wax. At dawn Tarn looked ordinary again, but inside the vial, droplet had solidified into microshards shaped like teardrop, color swirling from lavender to obsidian. Tamsin gasped soft. Night glass embryo. It grows in water. They broke camp, pressing north to Calmer Moor with heightened urgency. Queen Daenerys reached the Heart Beacon, a watchtower erected on the crag above Moat. 2 days ahead of schedule aboard the Storming Star, her sleek flagship clad in shimmering enamel scales forged by Karth artisans. Drogon and regal sword guard, wings brushing thunderheads heavy with late summer heat. She found Sansa waiting inside the lantern chamber, its obsidian lens glowing with steady ember fed by weirwood oil braziers. They clasped forearms. Years between meetings had etched lines deeper across cheekbones, but neither felt stranger to the other. Long nights of letter ink had sustained kinship anchored by Jon's memory. Daenerys's opening words cut to marrow. Bravo's coin masters fund last dawn splinter again. They harvest night glass from subterranean wells, bloodless but breathing. Feed it dreams of ice, coax it into blade wasp forms. Sansa studied Queen's face. Behind silver hair, eyes still burned violet, but there lurked fatigue of burdens older than her half-century. And you fear they'll send these wasps into roots. Yes, night glass seeks warmth. It will burrow to heartwood, freeze memory, crack weirwood lattice. If they rupture network, lanterns fall dark, realms blind. Tyrion shuffled from shadows, ledger in hand. He thumped it. Our spies report crates bound for Calmer Moor via clandestine barges up the shivering sea, then by sledge across knuckle ice fans. They plan to plant them like seeds. Sansa nodded grim. My daughter is already there. Concern flared in Daenerys's eyes. Then we do not wait. Calmer Moor at night resembled a giant's anvil cloaked in thunderclouds. Arianne arrived under that cloak, retinue wary. They crested ridge, gazed on plateau where ancient weirwoods stood, white trunks mottled gray, leaves blood dark even in moonlight. In the center rose a low mound, cracked like an egg, glowing faint blue from fissures. Night glass shipments delivered. Around mound, robed cultists chanted, arms raised to sky where aurora flickered unnatural violet pulses. Above them hovered shapes, glass-winged wasps large as ravens, born of night glass droplet. They darted, exhaled sparkling frost that left trail of brittle grass. Arian whispered tactics. Ser Jane readied longbow fletched with dragonglass-dipped shafts wrapped in basilisk oil. Tamsin produced runic talismans etched on birch. Arian unsheathed twin daggers of steel core lined with heartwood filigree, her father's design. Snow Shadow crouched. They advanced low. Jane's first arrow pierced a cultist's throat. Silent flash. Chaos erupted. Wasps screeched, swarming. Tamsin flung talisman. Runes ignited green flame net, catching 3 wasps, but dozens more dive-bombed. Frost stung skin where wings brushed. Snow Shadow leapt, jaws snapping, shards of ice spraying. Arian charged to mound Fisher. She plunged dagger into glowing crack. Heartwood filigree pulsed, sap alight. She felt cold surge, veins chilled, but held. She drove second dagger opposite side, carving circle. Fisher coughed azure steam. Mound shook violently. Wasps shrieked. Cultists wailed. Jane fought back-to-back with Snow Shadow, but a wasp stung her gauntlet, freezing steel to flesh. She roared pain yet fought on. A rumble split sky, Drogon's roar. Dawn light blossomed premature as dragon's dove. Torrents of controlled flame sweeping wasps from air. Fire met ice cloud. Explosive steam boomed. Drogon banked to avoid weirwood canopy. Daenerys descended astride regal, silver hair whipping in gale. Sansa rode behind on Northrend, a great northern destrier bred for queen. Longclaw strapped to saddle. They dismounted near mound. Sansa reached Arian struggling to withdraw dagger. Ice crust formed around blade hilt. She placed gloved hand atop daughters. Together, their combined warmth melted edge. Dagger jerked free, leaving heartwood imprint burning in ice. Tamsin examined mound. Glyph etched inside crack. If we do not sever anchor, wasps will keep swarming. Daenerys approached with a small rod, dragonglass spike fused with obsidian. She plunged spike center. Glyph flared violet, then shattered in flash of crimson light. Mound imploded, funnel of snow crystals rising before falling inert. Remaining wasps convulsed mid-flight, shards falling like black hail. Cultists broke ranks, fleeing into mist, but unsullied units' outriders emerged from ridge, corralling survivors. Silence settled, interrupted by Ser Jane's groan. Maester Tamsin tended her frostbite, applying warm birchsap balm. Daenerys surveyed plateau. We must root their nursery. Nightglass wells still spawn if left hidden. Sansa pointed to Weirwood cluster. The trees no path, but we dare not bring dragonfire into root heart. Burn memory again. Tamsin raised charred talisman. We craft runes of symbiosis. Heartwood chips, dragonbone dust, obsidian powder. Bury at each well. It'll turn nightglass to inert glass sand. Tyrion, panting from steep climb, raised brow. Elegant, fail-safe, and mercifully mundane.
Let us do.
Over fortnight, Allied forces dismantled Nightglass network. Dothraki riders burned supply depots. Mormont rangers hunted cultist cells. Dornish sappers collapsed tunnels. Braavosi coin lords, shamed by revelations and heavy sanctions from Caravosi shipping guilds, signed Treaty of Mirror Harbor restricting export of shadow crystals. Mandated transparency to Lighthouse Accord. When final well sealed, roots of Comer Moorside audible, wind thrummed low chord. Clouds parted revealing tens of shooting stars sweeping north to south. Fiery arcs glinting like arrows of the gods. Sansa, Daenerys, Arianne, and Council watched from ridge. Tamsin interpreted. Sky approves. Sansa squeezed daughter's hand. You carved first rune in new chapter. 8 months later, Central Beacon Conclave hosted in King's Landing, now rebuilt with terraces of marble-veined green from Dornish quarries. Flowers bloomed on balconies, and small folk thronged streets to glimpse dragons perched on remade Tower of the Hand. Queen Marjorie, hair threaded with starlight lacquer, welcome delegations with festival lasting 7 days. On final night, in amphitheater overlooking Blackwater's moonlit glitter, performers reenacted story of night's dawn. A stark actress, eyes steel, voice lark clear, spoke final lines. Fear is a winter in every heart, courage the hearth that thaws it. Children laughed, adults wept. Sansa felt weight lighten. Daenerys approached. The theater had to shorten events, she teased. Better they leave a child wanting more than falling asleep. Still, Daenerys murmured, truth remains. You hold north like root, I guard skies, but soon new guardians must rise. They regarded Arianne conversing with Dothraki translator, Tamsin and Jane sharing spiced wine. Seeds ready. Tyrion joined, wine in hand. We're drafting charter for Council of Lanterns. Permanent advisory seat for each realm, rotating stewardship. Sansa nodded. Then first rotation belongs to South. They taught us vines tangle yet bear fruit. She smiled at Marjorie across hall. Tyrion toasted. To vines and roots, wolves and dragons. They clinked goblets. Above, Maidenstorm soared, gold belly gleaming torchlight. Audience gasped. The dragon banked, unleashed plume of fire not in threat but flourish. An arc painting night with liquid amber that flowed, cooled, rained sparkles. When embers drifted, they mirrored lantern message coded by maesters. We stand together. Crowd erupted. Years passed gentle. Sansa aged into quiet legend. Wise wolf mother who walked gardens with children at knee telling stories of Jon, Arya, Bran, Robb, Rickon. She never claimed high throne beyond north though southern scribes offered. She remained steward of roots. Daenerys soared across seas forging alliances with Rhoynar enclaves, the Jade Sea Traders, even the Golden Empire. Dragons laid clutch on Summer Island's cliffs, establishing rookeries supervised by Maester Clarissa's successors. Arianne eventually sailed east as ambassador, married Balon Sands of Dorne in ceremony blending sand and snow. First union sanctified by weirwood birch sap. They founded academy in Sunspear teaching rune craftsmanship, dragon husbandry ethics. Tamsin became Archmaester of Unified Lore, overseeing mirror library carved inside translucent quartz mountain overrun with root tunnels. Ser Jane's frost-scarred hand healed enough to wield great axe once more. She commanded joint watch-free folk garrison at Eastwatch, ensuring that should whispers ever stir beyond shattered others, horns would blow with seasoned warning, and hearts would answer united. Sansa's final winter arrived during Festival of Lanterns' birth. She insisted on climbing rampart stairs herself, Snowshadow's grandpup pacing steady. There, under swirl of slow-falling snow, she watched beacons kindle sequentially. From White Harbor to Moat, to King's Landing's mirror tower, to far Braavosi Quay, each flame mirrored by obsidian lens into shimmering aurora. She felt chill ease into warmth, as if invisible arms, mothers, fathers, brothers, ghosts, wrapped about shoulders. She closed eyes. In mind sprang face of Jon as boy, shy grin, and words he once told a frightened sister. Even when we're apart, we're the same story. She whispered now, story's safe. Breath plumed white, drifted skyward like slender root seeking stars. Heart slowed, matched hush of snow. When guards found her at dawn, a serene smile rested upon lips, hair dusted with crystals sparkling pink in sunrise. In hand she clasped twig of birch char-tipped. Sacrifice fire carried after all. They laid her beneath God's wood, near ghosts' rest. 100,000 came to mourn. Northmen, Dornish, unsullied, free folk, dragons overhead in silent formation. Eulogies flowed like mountain streams. Daenerys spoke last. She taught wolves to fly on dragon wings, taught dragons to land among wolves. She made dawn. They planted sapling at grave, a hybrid birchweirwood bred by Tamsin. Leaves bled red veins. Roots embraced stone deep, linking to network Bran forged. That night lanterns flared brighter than ever. Some claimed each tower's flame flickered wolf-head silhouette. Centuries later, scholars would open mirror libraries' jade doors, trace parchments brittle with age recording these chronicles. They'd argue which battle turned tide, which queen most pivotal, but all agreed on root, unity of pack. And in taverns across continents, traveling bards still sung no subtitles, only narrative of how a bastard's death birthed dawn, how queens became sisters, how root and flame braided to banish shadow. Their ballads ended often with quiet line children whispered before sleep. As long as lanterns burn, the pack remembers. And somewhere beyond time's scroll, perhaps on plain where weirwood dreams drift and dragon roar becomes thunder, the spirit of Jon Snow turned face to soft horizon, knowing at last his watch was over, and dawn belonged to the living. Ghosts of root and ember lay quiet beneath the birch-weirwood hybrid where Sansa Stark's bones mingled with Wolf's loyal beasts. Time drifted forward like mist across a spring barley field. Slow, inevitable, clotting sorrow into memory, memory into legend, legend into myth. In Winterfell's ancient granary halls, barley stores never once dwindled since her passing. In Crannog Town's reed boats still bore lanterns hallowed by her decree, and each dusk, the spectral chain of beacon towers sang flare to flare, scattering iridescent rings that skated the high clouds, a luminous reminder of the pack's vow. Dawn broke on the 99th lantern year, the centennial feast looming closer than harvest. In the rookery, ravens preened, restless. Nibs black as cinders, beaks tapping on cedar bars, and in the hush before first bell, one bird gnawed free, lofted through an open slit, and vanished to the north as if tugged by invisible string. Moments later, every raven in Winterfell's coat rattled wings in unison, an ill-omened heartbeat echoing from rafter to flagstone. Maester Aldrich, gray-bearded successor to Tamsin, frowned at this convulsion of instinct, felt scrolls rustle though wind seeped nowhere. He marked the disturbance in his day ledger, then climbed to the east battlement, scanning pale skies. Nothing stirred, save a vague, immense shimmer of lilac hovering on horizon's rim. He squinted, half thought it mirage wrought by sunrise. He set quill behind ear, whispered to old gods and new, and descended to ring advisory bell. Far west, at Seaguard Bay where gulls nested in the massoned crevices of the rebuilt tower, Lady Mara Reed, Grand Swamp Envoy, steered her marsh catamaran toward a visiting Dornish sand skimmer. Her frog spear lay across knees, but her eyes fixed on same lilac gleam now spreading tendrils across outer skyband, draining dawn peach to pallid violet. She hailed the skimmer and heard in answer a warbling trumpet. Not a dune horn, but the panicked cry of axe-beak drag mules. Marsh folk and dune traders alike paused, knuckles whitening on oars and rigging, as color leached from light. In Dragonstone's rookery courtyard, older Drogon dozed. Dragons seldom dream apart. His brood, maiden storm-grown bulk of 3 war galleys, night whisper sleek as pyrebird, golden ash, rainwing and gentle emberlark, sprawled about terraces sun-baked. At the precise bell that Aldrich knelt to the sky, Drogon's lids snapped wide. He rose roaring, neck ridges bristling, flame venting in reflex. His underside glowed, not with typical molten ember but a shimmer of strange pale fire that flicked cerulean at edges. His brood lifted too, unsettled, cords of smoke trembling from jaws. Daenerys Stormborn, now Elder Queen still limber as dancer, strode from the Hall of Flames, sandals silent. She laid weathered hand on black scale, felt tremor pulse up forearm. Eyes tightened. Ancient blood sensed returning chill. Across narrow sea, bravos awakened to commotion of coin towers. Glassary Exchange demanded audits when bureau scribes reported nested ledgers evaporated into blank vellum. The Goat Guild's lunar clocks reverse spin. Canals churned mauve. Fleet bells told though no order pulled ropes. High over central dome soared starling murmurations yet shaped not into usual swirling knots but perfect rings, orbiting invisible center. Bravos bankers muttered about realm's equilibrium fraying. Those who remembered the last dawn cult folded shutters, whispered hex prayers. On Royner salt plains, once bone-dry, milk-blue ponds surfaced overnight, their water crystallizing into hexagonal plates at noon flash. Harvesters cut these plates, finding them light as gossamer yet unmelting. They stacked for export, By sundown the stacks evaporated, leaving only fine violet dust smelling of cedar and storm. Merchants rode east to report wonder. 1 week of strangeness rolled, and watch ravens converged on Winterfell faster than scribes could trim quills. They carried identical fragments. Coastal fishermen spotted islands where none stood, made of mirrored cliffs. Free folk trappers caught elk sporting antlers of opaline glass. The summer sea reflected not sun but sundogs. Multiple false suns chasing each other, day and night. In Mirror Library Mount, Archmaester Sorel, Tamsin's grand pupil, spread world maps. Pinned colored threads. Lilac bloom vectors. Lines converged on a near-perfect circle centered not on any landmark but open ocean. The mouth of dawn. A vortex once described only in Valyrian star charts. Sorel penned urgent cipher. Temporal lens forming. Barriers between root memories and cosmic frost thinning. Echo of Night King's forge resurfacing beyond mortal coil. She dispatched Hawk to Moat Caelin's citadel. The hawk never reached. Shimmer in sky widened, weaving lattice of translucent petals. They drifted downward, crystalline snow yet warm to touch. Where petals settled upon tide pools, water solidified to mirror. On farmland, wheat whitened, rigid yet unbroken, as though suspended in ice while remaining alive. Animals tracked violet petal storm northward, eerily calm. Humans felt stirring of other place in marrow. Unease with no name. Daenerys called conclave of lanterns. Beacon horns across realm braid triple flare. Root, flame, tide. Flags rose. Ships launched. The dragons parted clouds. Beacons flaring midday. From Sunspear Academy, Arianne Sandstark, court scholar, sailed with rune core bearing crates of heartwood, dragonbone, and obsidian dust for emergency lattice. At Winterfell, Aldrich stood with Jane Umber, now grey-templed warden of Eastwatch, and Lady Enys Karstark, bannered in star-white sunburst. They studied skyshift. Longclaw, enshrined near birchweirwood, throbbed faint inner glow. Ancient steel tasting cosmic cold again. Jane gestured to lilac arc now dominating dusk. Looks like a serpent biting horizon. Aldrich nodded. Yet teeth turned outward, devouring stars. They prepped battalion. Moose-mounted archers, Crannog pyreslingers, Manderly spearmaids. Lantern crypts unlocked, distributing obsidian frostbane javelins. Dragonstone seers charted petal storms. Each storms I birthed a column of crystal water rising kills tall, then folding back, leaving ring of floating shards resonating like tuning forks. Scholars named them mirror harps. Instruments responded to thought. When apprentices approached, harps chimed chord approximating heartbeats. Daenerys suspected these harps were gate keys. Portals if struck in precise sequence. Hurried experiments with rune drums found combos generating tiny wormholes glimpsing black voids specked with ice stars. Closing them required simultaneous flame and root pulse. Bravos, fearing cosmic trade disruption, demanded council authorize coin for gate control. Marjorie, too, grandchild of first, voiced caution. Gateway use could unmoor seasons or unleash unknown wights. Ultimately, Conclave resolved. Map harps, prevent unsanctioned activation, discover origin. They dispatched 3 houses, Wolves of North, Dragons of Dragonstone, Vines of Tyrells, each to separate harp cluster at edges of phenomenon. Arianne led Dragonborn Team West to Sunset Sea's Mirror Reef. Maiden Storm circled while boats neared cluster of 20 harps anchored midway above glowing abyss. Water below seemed absent. A starfield of swirling galaxies replaced sea. She anchored, set heartwood rune rods in perimeter. Crew of Royner glasscutters advanced. Arianne tapped 1 harp with rune-etched mallet. Note reverberated low, turned in for pitch feeling more than hearing. Abyss responded. Tendrils of light corkscrewed upward, caressed harp strings, producing echo that mirrored tone thrice until cluster vibrated luminous. Sudden memory floods smashed into minds. Visions of first men forging packs, children of forest weaving songs, Night King's forging moment in far northern cavern. Not glimpses but lived reverie. Crew gasped, wept. One fell to knees, begging to stay inside memory's warmth. Ariane recovered first, pulled back. She realized harps were archive wells storing not ice but recorded consciousness of realms. Library of cosmic experiences. Nightglass cults sought to weaponize wells by feeding them frost prime to freeze memory networks, leaving world blank. Next day, Conclave collated findings. Tyrell Envoy reported similar.
Solution débatted, destroy wells?
Risk erasing stored root memories? Or repurpose as knowledge vault? Roots whispered. Brand's voice echoing faint through sap. Curators, not burners. Decision. We've living ward harnessing wells as sentinel grid. Should Frost Prime attempt again, wells would broadcast alarm. To implement, Rune Core hammered birchbone pylons around each cluster, linking to lantern network. Dragons melted nightglass residues into inert violet sand fused into sentinel runes. In northmost cluster, Jane Umber's team repelled rogue goat skull sect still trying freeze. She fought alongside Snowshadow's grandpup, Frost Bloom, under polar light swirling like dragonfire. Heartwood axes cleaved violet golems. Lantern bolts shat. Red. Victory cost lives, but sentinel grid completed. When final pylon placed, violet canopy rippled, retracting. Sky returned deep blue. Petal storms ceased. Yet pulse remained, wells now integrated. They hummed faint, restful. Lantern year 100. Centennial feast matured into dawn jubilee. Bastards, nobles, freedmen danced across Winterfell's widened courtyard. Dragons circled overhead trailing sparks of gold dust. Mirror harps sang lullaby timbre, projecting kaleidoscopic aurora across entire sky visible from Dorne to the wall. Aldrich read proclamation. Realm stands unified not by fear of night, but by curiosity of stars. He dedicated new observatory atop Beacon Tower. Queen Daenerys, hair snowy silver now, embraced Arianne as successor to Dragonstone's embassy. Tyrell Rosemary 3 gifted seeds that glow, nightflower vines, to plant along sentinel pylons. Frost Bloom howled, answered by pack across Wolfswood. Root memory singing forward. In private quiet, Daenerys visited Sansa's hybrid tree. She touched bark, smooth white flaked with emerald swirl, and murmured, "You once said fences of fear crumble. We built telescopes instead." Leaves rustled, releasing white petal that drifted onto her palm. She smiled, tucked petal into diary. Centuries more washed by, yet sentinel grid maintained. Watchers of lanterns became stewards of harps, tuning chords at equinox. They learned to dip into archives, retrieving lost languages, extinct bird songs, faces of ancestors. Never overlong, lest memory drown will. Schools taught respect. Journeys into wells required triad. Heartwood token, dragon scale, lantern permit. Nightglass cult rose thrice again, each time found by sentinel hum before frost matured. One era's renegade sought to churn well energies into time loop. Sentinel ran root dragon pulse, dissolving scheme. Eventually harps mellowed, harmonizing into background cosmic melody. Dragons nested along mirror reefs, coiling around pylon bases while their riders studied constellations. Free folk developed star-sled sails gliding up well-born thermals, mapping high atmosphere. Millennia later, stories told of an ancient age when a single man's death galvanized wolves and dragons, when queens traded swords for songs, when root and flame braided sentinel light. They spoke name John with reverence though records blurred details, called Sansa the Weaver, Bran the Rootwalker, Daenerys Mother of Morning, Arianne the Archivist. In Dreamwalk Beyond Wells, some said you can still find them. A pack, luminous, racing across galactic snows, pausing to look back at every living soul and whisper, wordless but clear, remember. And so memory persisted. Not rigid stone but living lattice, birch leaf trembling in cosmic breeze, lantern flare at horizon's edge, violet well shimmering with songs of those who once feared night but learned instead to listen, to braid fears into bridges, to step beyond winter together. Even as galaxies wheeled and harps drifted fractal orbits, children on hilltops traced threads of aurora, pointing, "See? That line there, that's the direwolf's lantern. And those 3, dragon's breath, they watch us while we dream." Then they ran down slopes, laughter echoing. Confident dawn would greet them. And dawn did over and over. Its promise secured by root and flame, by memory and courage, by a pack whose story outlived names, etched into the lattice of the world so deeply that even cosmic frost could not erase it, only refract its light into uncountable new mornings.